healing. Late in the afternoon, the 12 came to him and said,
"Send the crowd away so they can go to the surrounding villages and countryside and find food and lodging, because we are in a remote place here."
He replied,
"Go and buy food for all this crowd."
About 5,000 men were there. But he said to his disciples,
"Have them sit down in groups of about 50 each."
The disciples did so. Everyone sat down. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke them. Then he gave them to the disciples to set before the basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. Once when Jesus was praying in private and his disciples were with him, he asked them,
"Who do the crowds say I am?"
They replied,
"Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah,
and still others that one of the prophets of long ago has come back to life.
But what about you?"
He strictly warned them not to tell this to anyone. And he said,
"The Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law. And he must be killed. And on the 3rd day, be raised to life."
Then he said to them all,
"Save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. What good is it for you to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit your very self? If any of you are ashamed of me and Father and of the holy angels, truly I tell you, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see the kingdom of God."
About 8 days after Jesus said this, he took Peter, John, and James with him and went up unto a mountain. His clothes became as bright as a flash of lightning. 2 men, Moses and Elijah, appeared in glorious splendor, talking with Jesus. They spoke about his departure, which he was about to bring to fulfillment at Jerusalem. Peter and his men standing with him. As the men were leaving Jesus, Peter said to him,
"Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah."
He did not know what he was saying. While he was speaking, a cloud appeared and covered them.
"And this is my son, whom I have chosen. Listen to him."
When the voice had spoken, they found that Jesus was alone. The disciples kept this to themselves and did not tell anyone at that time what they had seen. The next day, when they came down from the mountain,
"I beg you to look at my son, for he is my only child." A spirit seizes him, and he suddenly screams. It throws him into convulsions, so that he foams at the mouth. It scarcely ever leaves him, and is destroying him. I beg your disciples to drive it out, but they could not.
"Until I stay with you and put up with you. Bring your son here."
even while the boy was coming, the demon threw him to the ground in a convulsion. But Jesus rebuked the evil spirit, healed the boy, and gave him back to his father. And they were all amazed at the greatness of God. Disciples,
Listen carefully to what I am about to tell you. The Son of Man is going to be delivered over to human hands.
What? But they did not understand what this meant.
What does he mean?
It was hidden from them, so that they did not grasp it. And they were afraid to ask him about it.
I want to.
An argument started among the disciples as to which one of them would be the greatest. Beside him. Then he said to them,
"Whoever welcomes this little child in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. For whoever is least among you all is the greatest."
Master, because he is not one of us.
"Do not stop him,
Jesus said.
for whoever is not against you is for you."
As the time approached for him to be taken up to heaven, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. And he sent messengers on ahead, who went into a Samaritan village to get things ready for him. But the people there did not welcome him.
"Lord, do you want us to call fire down from heaven to destroy them?"
But Jesus turned and rebuked them. Then he and his disciples went to another village. As they were walking along the road, a man said to him, "I will follow you."
Birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head.
He said to another man,
Follow me.
Lord, first let me go and bury my father.
Jesus said to him,
Let the dead bury their own dead, but you go and proclaim the...
But first let me go back and say goodbye to my family.
No one who puts a hand to the plow and looks back is fit for service in the kingdom of God.
Chapter 2. And Hannah prayed and said, My heart rejoiceth in the Lord. Mine horn is exalted in the Lord. My mouth is enlarged over mine enemies, because I rejoice in thy salvation. There is none holy as the Lord, for there is none beside thee, neither is there any rock like our God. Talk no more so exceeding proudly. Let not arrogancy come out of your mouth, for the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty men are broken, and they that stumbled are girded with strength ceased. So that the barren hath borne 7, and she that hath many children is waxen feeble. The Lord killeth and maketh alive. He bringeth down to the grave and bringeth up. The Lord maketh poor and maketh rich. He bringeth low and lifteth up. He raiseth up the poor out of the dust, and lifteth up the beggar from the dunghill, to set them among princes, and to make them inherit the throne of glory. His saints, and the wicked shall be silent in darkness. For by strength shall no man prevail. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Out of heaven shall he thunder upon them. The Lord shall judge the ends of the earth, and he shall give strength unto his king, and exalt the horn of his anointed. Before Eli the priest. Now the sons of Eli were sons of Belial. They knew not the Lord. And the priest's custom with the people was that when any man offered sacrifice, the priest's servant came while the flesh was in seething. With the flesh, all that the flesh was brought up, the priest took for himself. So they did in Shiloh unto all the Israelites that came thither. Also, before they burnt the fat, the priest's servant came and said to the man that sacrificed, Give flesh to roast for the priest, for he will not have sodden flesh of thee, but raw. And if any man said unto him, Let them not fail to burn the fat presently, and if not, I will take it by force. Wherefore the sin of the young men was very great before the Lord, for men abhorred the offering of the Lord. But Samuel ministered before the Lord, being a child, girded with a linen ephod. Moreover, his mother made him a little coat, and brought it to him from year to year, when she came up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. And Eli blessed Elkanah and his wife, and said, The Lord give thee seed of this woman, for the loan which is lent to the Lord. And they went unto their own home. And the Lord visited Hannah, so that she conceived, and bare 3 sons and 2 daughters. And the child Samuel grew before the Lord. Now Eli was very old, and heard all that his sons did unto all his to them. Why do ye such things? For I hear of your evil dealings by all this people. Nay, my sons, for it is no good report that I hear. Ye make the Lord's people to transgress. If one man sin against another, the judge shall judge him. But if a man sin against the Lord, who shall entreat for him? Would slay them. And the child Samuel grew on, and was in favor both with the Lord and also with men. And there came a man of God unto Eli, and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Did I plainly appear unto the house of thy father when they were in Egypt in Pharaoh's house, to burn incense, to wear an ephod before me? And did I give unto the house of thy father all the offerings made by fire of the children of Israel? Wherefore kick ye at my sacrifice and at mine offering, which I have commanded in my habitation, and honorest thy sons above me, to make yourselves fat with the I said indeed that thy house and the house of thy father should walk before me forever. But now the Lord saith, Be it far from me. For them that honor me I will honor, and they that despise me shall be lightly esteemed. Behold, the days come that I will cut off thine arm, and the arm of thy father's house, that there shall not be an old man in thine house, and thou shalt see an enemy in my habitation, in all the wealth which God shall give Israel. And there shall consume thine eyes, and to grieve thine heart. And all the increase of thine house shall die in the flower of their age. And this shall be a sign unto thee, that shall come upon thy 2 sons, on Hophni and Phinehas. In one day They shall die, both in mine heart and in my mind. And I will build him a sure house, and he shall walk before mine anointed forever. And it shall come to pass that everyone that is left in thine house shall come and crouch to him for a piece of silver and a morsel, a piece of bread.
Now a man named Ananias, together with his wife Sapphira, also sold a piece of property. With his wife's full knowledge, he kept back part of the money.
How is it that Satan has so filled your heart that you have lied to the Holy Spirit and have kept for yourself some of the money you received for the land? Didn't it belong to you before it was sold? And after it was sold, wasn't the human beings, but to God?
When Ananias heard this, he fell down and died. And great fear seized all who heard what had happened. Then some young men came forward, wrapped up his body, and carried him out and buried him. About 3 hours later, his wife came in, not knowing what had happened. Peter asked her,
Tell me, is this the price you and Ananias got for the land?
Yes,
she said.
that is the price.
Peter said to her,
How could you conspire to test the Spirit of the Lord? Listen, the feet of those who buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out also.
At that moment, she fell down at his feet, her out, and buried her beside her husband. Great fear seized the whole church and all who heard about these events. The apostles performed many signs and wonders among the people, and all the believers used to meet together in solemn were added to their number. As a result, people brought the sick into the streets and laid them on beds and mats so that at least Peter's shadow might fall on some of them as he passed by. Crowds gathered also from the towns around Jerusalem, bringing their sick and those. The high priest and all his associates, who were members of the party of the Sadducees, were filled with jealousy. They arrested the apostles and put them in the public jail. But during the night,
Temple courts,
he said,
and tell the people all about this new life.
At daybreak, they entered the temple courts as they had been told and began to teach the people. When the high priest and his associates arrived, they called together the Sanhedrin, the full assembly of the elders of Israel. The officers did not find them there, so they went back and reported,
We found the jail securely locked, with the guards standing at the doors. But when we opened them, we found no one inside.
On hearing this report, the captain of the temple guard and the chief priests were puzzled, wondering what this might lead to.
In the temple courts, teaching the people.
At that, the captain went with his officers and brought the apostles. They did not use force because they feared that the people would stone them. The apostles were brought in and made to appear before the Sanhedrin to be questioned by the high priest.
We gave you strict orders not to teach in this name,
He said,
yet you have obeyed God rather than human beings. The God of our ancestors raised Jesus from the dead, whom you killed by hanging him on a cross. God exalted him to his own right hand as Prince and Savior, that he might bring Israel to repentance and forgive their sins. We are witnesses of these things, and so is the Holy Spirit, whom God has given to those who obey him.
When they heard this, they were furious and wanted to put them to death. But a Pharisee named Gamaliel, a teacher of the law who was honored by all the people, stood up in the Sanhedrin and ordered that the men be put outside for a little while. Then he addressed the Sanhedrin.
Men of Israel, consider carefully what you intend to do to these men. Some time ago, Theudas appeared, claiming to be somebody, and about 400 men rallied to him. He was killed. All his followers, Judas the Galilean, appeared in the days of the census and led a band of people in revolt. He too was killed, and all his followers were scattered. Therefore, in the present case, I advise you, leave these men alone. Let them go. For if their purpose or activity is of human origin, it will fail. You will only find yourselves fighting against God.
His speech persuaded them. They called the apostles in and had them flogged. Then they ordered them not to speak in the name of Jesus and let them go. The apostles left the Sanhedrin rejoicing because they had been counted worthy of suffering disgrace for the name. Stop teaching and proclaiming the good news that Jesus is the Messiah.
Sometime later, there was an incident involving a vineyard belonging to Naboth the Jezreelite. The vineyard was in Jezreel, close to the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria.
In exchange, I will give you a better vineyard, or if you prefer, I will pay you whatever it is worth.
But Naboth replied,
The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my ancestors.
So Ahab went home, sullen and angry, because Naboth the Jezreelite had said, I will not give you the inheritance of my ancestors. He lay on.
Why are you so sullen? Why won't you eat?
He answered her,
Because I said to Naboth the Jezreelite, sell me your vineyard, or if you prefer, I will give you another vineyard in this place. But he said, I will not give you my vineyard.
Jezebel.
Cheer up. I'll get you the vineyard of Naboth, the Jezreelite.
So she wrote letters in Ahab's name, placed his seal on them, and sent them to the elders and nobles who lived in Naboth's city with him. In those letters, she wrote,
Proclaim a day of fasting and seat Naboth in a prominent place among the people, but seat 2 scoundrels opposite him, and have them bring charges that he has cursed both God and the king. Then take him out and stone him to death.
So the elders and nobles who lived in Naboth's city did as Jezebel directed in the letters she had written to them. They proclaimed a fast and seated Naboth in a prominent place among the people. Then 2 scoundrels came and sat opposite him and brought charges against Naboth before the people, saying,
Naboth has cursed both God and the king.
So they took him outside the city and stoned him to death. Then they sent word to Jezebel,
Naboth has been stoned to death.
As soon as Jezebel heard that Naboth had been stoned to death, she said to Ahab,
Get up and take possession of the vineyard of Naboth, the Jezreelite, that he refused to sell you. He is no longer alive, but dead.
When Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, he got up and went down to take possession of Naboth's vineyard. Then the word of the
rules in Samaria. He is now in Naboth's vineyard, where he has gone to take possession of it. Say to him, This is what the Lord says. Have you not murdered a man and seized his property? Then say to him, This is your blood. Yes, yours.
Ahab said to Elijah,
So, you have found me, my enemy.
I have found you,
he answered.
because you have sold yourself to do evil in the eyes of the Lord. He says, I am go from Ahab, every last male in Israel, slave or free. I will make your house like that of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, and that of Baasha, son of Ahijah, because you have aroused my anger and have caused Israel to sin. And also concerning Jezebel, the Lord says, dogs will devour Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel on those who die in the country.
There was never anyone like Ahab who sold himself to do evil in the eyes of the Lord, urged on by Jezebel, his wife. He behaved in the vilest manner by going after idols, like the Amorites, put on sackcloth and fasted. He lay in sackcloth and went around meekly. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite.
Have you noticed how Ahab has humbled himself before me? Because his house in the days of his son.
The word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, set your face against the Ammonites and prophesy against them. Say to them, hear the word of the sovereign Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says. Because you said, aha, over my sanctuary when they went into exile. Therefore, I am going to give you to the people of the east as a possession. They will set up their camps and pitch their tents among you. They will eat your fruit and drink your milk. Then you will know
that I am the Lord. For this is what the sovereign Lord says. Because you have clapped your hands and stamped your feet, rejoicing with all the malice of your heart against the land of Israel, therefore I will stretch out my hand against you and give you as plunder to the nations. I will wipe you out from among the nations and exterminate you. This is what the sovereign Lord says. Because Moab and Seir said,
Look, the house of Judah has become like all the other nations.
therefore I will expose the flank of Moab, beginning at its frontier towns, Beth Jeshimoth, Baal Meon, and Kiriathaim, the glory of that land. I will give Moab, along with the Ammonites, to the people of the east as a possession, so that the Ammonites will not be remembered among the nations. And I will inflict punishment on Moab. Then they will know that I am the Lord.
This is what the sovereign Lord says. Because Edom took revenge,
I will stretch out my hand against Edom and kill its people and their animals. I will lay it waste, and from Teman to Dedan they will fall by the sword. I will take vengeance on Edom by the hand of my people Israel, and they will deal with Edom in accordance with my anger.
sovereign Lord says. Because the Philistines acted in vengeance and took revenge with malice in their hearts, and with ancient hostility sought to destroy Judah, therefore this is what the sovereign Lord says.
I am about to stretch out my hand against the Philistines, and I will wipe out the Kerethites and destroy those remaining along the coast. I will carry out great vengeance on them and punish them in my wrath. Then they will know that I am the Lord when I take vengeance on them.
Chapter 14. And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations, that these made war with Bera, king of Sodom, which is Zoar. All these were joined together in the vale of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. 12 years they served Kedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. And in the 14th year came Kedorlaomer and the kings that were with him, and smote the Rephaims and Horites in their Mount Seir unto El Paran, which is by the wilderness. And they returned and came to En-Mishpat, which is Kadesh, and smote all the country of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites that dwelt in Hazezon Tamar. And there went out the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, the same as Zoar, and they joined battle with them in the vale of Siddim, with Kedorlaomer the king of Elam, and with Tidal king of nations, and with Amraphel king of Shinar, and Arioch king of Elasar, 4 kings with 5. And the vale of Siddim was full of slime pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled and fell there, and they that remained fled to the mountains. They took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. And there came one that had escaped, and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, and brother of Aner, and these were confederate with Abram. And when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan. And he divided himself against them. He brought back all the goods, and also brought again his brother Lot, and his goods, and the women also, and the people. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of Kedorlaomer and of the kings that were with him at the valley of Shavi, which is the king's dale. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine. And he was the priest of the Most High God. Blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand. And he gave him tithes of all. And the king of Sodom said unto Abram, Give me the persons, and take the goods to thyself. And Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted up mine hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from a thread even to a shoe latchet, and save only that which the young men have eaten, and the portion of the men which went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre. Let them take their portion.
There was a Benjamite, a man of standing, whose name was Kish, son of Abiel, the son of Zerah, the son of Bicharath, the son of Aphiah of Benjamin. And he was a head taller than anyone else. Now the donkeys belonging to Saul's father Kish were lost. And Kish said to his son Saul,
Take one of the servants with you, and go and look for the donkeys.
So he passed through the hill country of Ephraim and through the area around Shalisha, but they did not find them. They went on into them, but they did not find them.
When they reached the district of Zuph, Saul said to the servant who was with him,
Come, let's go back, or my father will stop thinking about the donkeys and start worrying about us.
But the servant replied,
Look, in this town there is a man of God. Here's what way to take.
Saul said to his servant,
If we go, what can we give the man? The food in our sacks is gone. We have no gift to take to the man of God. What do we have?
The servant answered him again.
Look,
he said,
I have a quarter of a shekel of silver. I will give it to the man of God so that he will tell us what way to take.
Formerly in Israel, because the prophet of today used to be called a seer.
Good,
Saul said to his servant.
Come, let's go.
So they set out for the town where the man of God was. As they were going up the hill to the town, they met some young women coming out to draw water, and they asked them,
Is the seer here?
He is.
They answered,
He's ahead of you, place. As soon as you enter the town, you will find him before he goes up to the high place to eat. The people will not begin eating until he comes, because he must bless the sacrifice. Afterward, those who are invited will eat. Go up now. You should find him about this time.
They went up to the town, and as they were entering, now the day before Saul came, the Lord had revealed this to Samuel.
About this time tomorrow, I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin. Anoint him ruler over my people Israel. He will deliver them from the hand of the
caught sight of Saul. The Lord said to him,
This is the man I spoke to you about. He will govern my people.
Saul approached Samuel in the gateway and asked,
Would you please tell me where the seer's house is?
I am the seer.
Samuel replied,
Go up ahead of me to the high place, for the day you are to eat with me. And in the morning, I will send you on your way and will tell you all that is in your heart. As for the donkeys you lost 3 days ago, do not worry about them. They have been found. And to whom is all the desire of Israel turned, if not to you and your whole family line?
Saul answered,
But am I not a Benjamite, from the smallest tribe of Israel? And is not my clan the least of all the clans of the tribe of Benjamin? Why do you say such a thing to me?
Then Samuel brought Saul and his servant into the hall and seated them at the head of those who were invited, about 30 in number. Samuel said to the cook,
Bring the piece of meat I gave you, the one I told you to lay aside.
So the cook took up the thigh with what was on it and set it in front of Saul. Samuel said,
Here is what has been kept for you. Eat, because it was set aside for you for this occasion. From the time I said, I have invited guests.
And Saul dined with Samuel that day. After they came down from the high place to the town, Samuel talked with Saul on the roof of his house. They rose about daybreak, and Samuel called to Saul on the roof,
Get ready, and I will send you on your way.
When Saul got ready, he and Samuel went outside together. As they were going down to the edge of the town, Samuel said to Saul,
Tell the servant to go on ahead of us.
And the servant did so.
But you, stay here for a while, so that I may give you a message from God.
The Book of Ezekiel.
Month on the 5th day, while I was among the exiles by the Kibar River, the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God.
On the 5th of the month, it was the 5th year of the exile of King Jehoiakim. The word of the Lord came to Ezekiel the priest, the son of Beuzai, by the Kibar River in the land of the Babylonians. There, the hand of the Lord was on him.
I looked, and I saw a windstorm coming out of the north, an immense cloud with flashing lightning and surrounded by brilliant light. The center of the fire looked like glowing metal, and in the fire was what looked like 4 living creatures. In appearance, their form was human, but each of them had 4 faces and 4 wings. Their legs were straight, their feet were like those of a calf and gleamed like burnished bronze. Under their wings, on their 4 sides, they had human hands. All 4 of them had faces and wings, and the wings of one touched the wings of another. Each one went straight ahead. They did not turn as they moved. Their faces looked like this. Each of the four had the face of a human being, and on the right side each had the face of a lion, and on the left the face of an ox. Each also had the face of an eagle. Such were their faces. They each had 2 wings spreading out upward, each wing touching that of the creature on either side, and each had 2 other wings covering its body. Each one went straight ahead. Wherever the spirit would go, they would go, without turning as they went. The appearance of the living creatures was like burning coals of fire or like torches. Fire moved back and forth among the creatures. It was bright and lightning flashed out of it. The creatures sped back and forth like flashes of lightning. As I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the ground beside each creature with its 4 faces. This was the appearance and structure of the wheels. They sparkled like topaz, and all 4 looked alike. Each appeared to be made like a wheel intersecting a wheel. As they moved, they would go in any one of the 4 directions the creatures faced. The wheels did not change direction as the creatures went. Their rims were high and awesome, and all 4 rims were full of eyes all around. When the living creatures moved, the wheels beside them moved. And when the living creatures rose from the ground, the wheels also rose. Wherever the spirit would go, they would go. And the wheels would rise along with them, because the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. When the creatures moved, they also moved, went along with them, because the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. Spread out above the heads of the living creatures was what looked something like a vault, sparkling like crystal and awesome. Under the vault, their wings were stretched out one toward the other, and each had 2 wings covering its body. When the creatures moved, I heard the sound of their wings, like though when they stood still, they lowered their wings. Then there came a voice from above the vault over their heads as they stood with lowered wings. Above the vault over their heads was what looked like a throne of lapis lazuli, and high above on the throne was a figure like that of a man. I saw that from what appeared to be his waist up, he looked like glowing metal, as if full of fire, and that from there down he looked like fire, and brilliant light surrounded him, like the appearance of a rainbow. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. When I saw it, I fell face down, and I heard the voice of one speaking.
Do not sacrifice to the Lord your God an ox or a sheep that has any defect or flaw in it. For that would be the Lord gives you is found doing evil in the eyes of the Lord your God, in violation of his covenant, and contrary to my command, has worshipped other gods, bowing down to them, or to the sun, or the moon, or the stars in the sky. And this has been brought to your attention, then you must investigate it thoroughly. If it is true and it has been proved that this detestable thing has been done in Israel, take the man or woman who has done this evil deed to your city gate and stone that person to death. On the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, a person is to be put to death. But no one is to be put to death on the testimony of only one. And then the hands of all the people, you must purge the evil from among you. If cases come before your courts that are too difficult for you to judge, whether bloodshed, lawsuits, go to the Levitical priest and to the judge who is in office at that time. Inquire of them, and they will give you the verdict. You must act according to the decisions they give you at the place the Lord will choose. Be careful to do everything they give you. Do not turn aside from what they tell you, to the right or to the left. Anyone who shows contempt for the judge or for the priest who stands ministering there to the Lord your God is to be put to death. You must purge, not be contemptuous again. When you enter the land the Lord your God is giving you, and have taken possession of it and settled in it, and you say, Let us set a king over us like all the nations around us. Be sure to appoint over you the king the Lord your God chooses. He must be from among your own people. Do not place a foreigner over you, one who is not an Israelite. The king, moreover, must not acquire great numbers of horses for himself back that way again. He must not take many wives, or his heart will be led astray. He must not accumulate large amounts of silver and gold. When he takes the throne of his kingdom, he is to write for taken from that of the Levitical priest. It is to be with him, and he is to read it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to revere the Lord his God, and follow carefully all the words of this law and these decrees, and not consider himself better than his fellow. Then he and his descendants will reign a long time over his kingdom in Israel.
Listen to me, you who pursue righteousness and who seek the Lord. Look to the rock from which you were cut, and to the quarry from which you were hewn. When I called him, he was only one man, and I blessed him and made him many. The Lord will surely comfort Zion and will look with compassion on all her ruins. Joy and gladness will be found in her, thanksgiving and the sound of singing. Listen to me, my people. Hear me, my nation. Instruction will go out from me. My justice will become a light to the nations. My righteousness draws near speedily. My salvation is on the way, and my arm will bring justice to the nations. The islands will look at the earth beneath. The heavens will vanish like smoke. The earth will wear out like a garment, and its inhabitants die like flies. But my salvation will last forever. My righteousness will never fail. Hear me, you who know, for the moth will eat them up like a garment. The worm will devour them like wool. But my righteousness will last forever. My salvation through all generations.
Awake, as in days gone by, as in generations of old. Was it not you who cut Rahab to pieces, who pierced that monster through? Was it not you who dried up the sea, the waters of the great deep, who made a road in the depths of the sea so that the redeemed might cross over? Those the Lord has rescued will return. They will enter, joy will overtake them, and sorrow and sighing will flee away.
I, even I, am he who comforts you. Who are you that you fear mere mortals, human beings who are but grass, that you forget the Lord your Maker, who stretched out the heaven because of the wrath of the oppressor, who is bent on destruction? For where is the wrath of the oppressor? The cowering prisoners will soon be set free. They will not die in their dungeon, nor will they lack bread. For I am the Lord your God, who stirs up the sea so that its waves roar, and covered you with the shadow of my hand. I, who set the heavens in place, who laid the foundations of the earth, and who say to Zion, you are my people.
Awake, awake, rise up, Jerusalem, to its dregs, the goblet that makes people stagger. Among all the children she bore, there was none to guide her. Among all the children she reared, there was none to take her by the hand. These double calamities have come. Sword, who can console you? Your children have fainted. They lie at every street corner like antelope caught in a net. They are filled with the wrath of the Lord, with the rebuke of your God. Therefore, hear this, you afflicted one, made drunk but not with wine. This is what your sovereign Lord says, your God who defends his people.
See, I have taken out of your hand the cup that made you stagger. From that cup, the goblet of my wrath, you will never drink again. I will put it into the hands of your tormentors, who set the ground like a street to be walked on.
Chapter 16. Observe the month of Abib, and keep the Passover unto the Lord thy God. For in the month of Abib the Lord thy God brought thee forth out of Egypt by night. Thou shalt therefore sacrifice the Passover unto the Lord bread with it. 7 days shalt thou eat unleavened bread therewith, even the bread of affliction. For thou camest forth out of the land of Egypt in haste, that thou mayest remember the day when thou camest forth out of the land of Egypt all the days of thy life. And there shall be no leavened bread seen with thee in all thy coasts 7 days. Neither shall there anything of thou mayest not sacrifice the Passover within any of thy gates, which the Lord thy God giveth thee, but at the place which the Lord thy God shall choose to place his name in, there thou shalt sacrifice the Passover at even at the going down of the sun, at the season that thou camest forth out of Egypt. And thou shalt roast and eat it in the place which the Lord thy God shall choose. And thou shalt turn in the morning. 6 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread. And on the 7th day shall be a solemn assembly to the Lord thy God. Thou shalt do no work therein. 7 weeks shalt thou number unto thee. Begin to number the 7 weeks, from such time as thou beginnest to put the sickle to the corn. And thou shalt keep the feast of weeks unto the Lord thy God, with the tribute of a free will offering. And thou shalt rejoice before the Lord thy God, thou and thy son and thy daughter, and thy manservant and thy maidservant, and the Levite that is within thy gates, and the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow that are among you, in the place which the Lord thy God hath chosen to place his name there. And thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondman in the Feast of Tabernacles 7 days, after that thou hast gathered in thy corn and thy wine. And thou shalt rejoice in thy feast, thou and thy son and thy daughter, and thy manservant and thy maidservant, and the Levite, the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow that are within thy gates. 7 days shalt thou keep a solemn feast unto the Lord thy God, in the place which the Lord shall choose. Surely rejoice. 3 times in a year shall all thy males appear before the Lord thy God in the place which he shall choose, in the feast of unleavened bread, and in the feast of weeks, and in the feast of tabernacles. And they shall not appear before the Lord empty. Every man shall give as he is able, according to the blessing of the Lord thy God which he hath given thee. Judges and they shall judge the people with just judgment. Thou shalt not wrest judgment. Thou shalt not respect persons, neither take a gift, for a gift doth blind the eyes of the wise, and pervert the words of the righteous. That which is altogether just shalt thou follow, that thou mayest live and inherit the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thou shalt not plant thee a grove of any trees near unto the altar of the Lord thy God, which thou shalt make thee. Neither shalt thou set thee up any image, which the Lord thy God hateth. Chapter 3. And the child Samuel ministered unto the Lord before Eli. And it came to pass at that time, when Eli was laid down in his place, and his eyes began to wax dim, that he could not see, and ere the lamp of God went out in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was, and Samuel was laid down to sleep, that the Lord called Samuel. And he answered, Here am I. I called not. Lie down again. And he went and lay down. And the Lord called yet again, Samuel. And Samuel arose and went to Eli and said, Here am I, for thou didst call me. And he answered, I called not, my son. And the Lord called Samuel again the 3rd time. And he arose and went to Eli and said, Here am I, for thou didst call me. And Eli perceived that the Lord had called the child. Therefore Eli said unto Samuel, Go, lie down. And it shall be, hear it. So Samuel went and lay down in his place. And the Lord came and stood and called as at other times, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel answered, Speak, for thy servant heareth. And the Lord said to Samuel, Behold, I will do a thing. I will perform against Eli all things which I have spoken concerning his house. When I begin, I will also make an end. For I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knoweth, because his sons made themselves vile, and he restrained them not. And therefore I have sworn unto the house of Eli, that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be purged with sacrifice, nor offering forever. And Samuel lay until the morning, and opened the doors of the house of the Lord. And Samuel feared to show Eli the vision. Then Eli called Samuel and said, Samuel, my son. And he answered, Here am I. And he said, What is the thing that the Lord hath said unto thee? I pray thee, hide it not from me. God do so to thee, and more also, if thou hide anything from me of all the things that he said unto thee. And Samuel told him every whit, and hid nothing from him. And he said, It is the Lord. Let him do what seemeth him good. And Samuel grew, and the Lord was with him, and did let none of his words fall to the ground. And all Israel, from Dan even to Beersheba, knew that Samuel was established to be a prophet of the Lord. And the Lord appeared again in Shiloh. For the Lord revealed himself to Samuel in Shiloh by the word of the Lord.
A prophecy concerning Egypt. See, the Lord rides on a swift cloud and is coming to Egypt.
I will stir up Egyptian against Egyptian. Brother will fight against brother. Neighbor against neighbor. City against city. Kingdom against kingdom. The Egyptians will lose heart, and I will bring their plans to nothing. They will consult the idols and the spirits of the dead, the mediums and the spiritists. I will hand the Egyptians over to the power of a cruel master, and a fierce king will rule over them.
Declares the Lord Almighty. The waters of the river will dry up, and the riverbed will dwindle and dry up. The reeds and rushes will wither. Also the plants along the Nile at the mouth of the river. Every sown field along the Nile will become parched, will blow away and be no more. Those who fish will groan and lament. All who cast hooks into the Nile, those who comb flax will despair. The weavers of fine linen will lose hope. The workers in cloth will be dejected, and all the wage earners will be sick at heart. The officials of Zone are nothing but fools. The wise counselors of Pharaoh give senseless advice. How can you say to Pharaoh,
I am one of the wise men, a disciple of the ancient kings?
Where are your wise men now? Let them show you and make known what the Lord Almighty has planned against Egypt. The officials of Zone have become fools, led Egypt astray. The Lord has poured into them a spirit of dizziness. They make Egypt stagger in all that she does, as drunkards stagger around in their vomit. There is nothing Egypt can do, head or tail. Palm shudder with fear at the uplifted hand that the Lord Almighty raises against them. And the land of Judah will bring terror to the Egyptians. Everyone to whom Judah is mentioned will be terrified because of what the Lord Almighty is planning against them. In that day, 5 cities in Egypt will speak the language of Canaan, be called the city of the sun. In that day, there will be an altar to the Lord in the heart of Egypt, and a monument to the Lord at its border. It will be a sign and witness to the Lord Almighty in the land of Egypt. A Savior and Defender, and He will rescue them. So the Lord will make Himself known to the Egyptians, and in that day they will acknowledge the Lord. They will worship with sacrifices and grain offerings. They will make vows to the Lord. He will strike them and heal them. They will turn to the Lord, and He will respond to their pleas and heal them. In that day, there will be a highway from Egypt to Assyria. The Assyrians will go to Egypt, and in that day Israel will be the third, along with Egypt and Assyria, a blessing on the earth. The Lord Almighty will bless them, saying,
Blessed be Egypt, my people. Assyria, my handiwork, and Israel.
Whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by others, a man of suffering and familiar with pain, like one from whom people hide their faces. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed, for by his wounds we are healed. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led, so he did not open his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. Yet who of his generation protested? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgression of my people he was punished. He was assigned a grave, nor was any deceit in his mouth. Yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life an offering for sin, he will see his offspring and after he has suffered, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. Therefore, I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoil numbered with the transgressors. For he bore the sin of many and made intercession for the transgressors.
An attacker advances against you, Nineveh. Guard the fortress. Watch the road. Though destroyers have laid them waste and have ruined their vines. The shields of the soldiers are red. The warriors are clad in scarlet. The metal on the chariots flashes on the day they are made ready. The spears of juniper are brandished in torches. They dart about like lightning. Nineveh summons her picked troops, yet they stumble on their way. They dash to the city wall. The protective shield is put in place. The river gates are thrown open and the palace collapses. It is decreed that Nineveh be exiled and carried away. Her female slaves moan. They cry, but no one turns back. Plunder the silver, plunder the gold. The supply is endless. The wealth from all its treasures, she is pillaged, plundered, stripped. Hearts melt, knees give way, bodies tremble, every face grows pale. Where the lion and lioness went, and the cubs with nothing to fear. The lion killed enough for his cubs and strangled the prey for his mate, filling his lairs with the kill and his dens with the prey.
I am against you,
declares the Lord Almighty.
Pray on the earth. The voices of your messengers will no longer be heard.
Now Samuel died, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him. Desert of Paran. A certain man in Maon, who had property there at Carmel, was very wealthy. He had 1,000 goats and 3,000 sheep, which he was shearing in Carmel. His name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. She was an intelligent and beautiful woman, but her husband was surly and mean in his dealings. He was a Calebite. While David was in the wilderness,
Nabal at Carmel, and greet him in my name. Say to him, long life to you, good health to you and your household, and good health to all that is yours. Now I hear that it's sheep shearing time. When your shepherds were with us, we did not mistreat them. And the whole time they were at Carmel, nothing of theirs was missing. Ask your own servants, and they will tell you. Therefore be favorable toward my men, since we come at a festive time. Please give your servants and your son David whatever you can find for them.
when David's men arrived, they gave Nabal this message in David's name. Then they waited. Nabal answered David's servants.
Who is this David? Why should I take my bread and water and the meat I have slaughtered for my shearers and give it to men coming from who knows where?
David's men turned around and went back. When they arrived, they reported every word. David said to his men,
Each of you, strap on your sword.
So they did. And David strapped supplies. One of the servants told Abigail, Nabal's wife,
David sent messengers from the wilderness to give our master his greetings, but he hurled insults at them. Yet these men were very good to us. They did not mistreat us, and the whole time we were out in the fields near them, nothing was missing. Now think it over and see what you can do, because disaster is hanging over our master and his whole household. He is such a wicked man that no one can talk to him.
Abigail acted quickly. She took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of roasted grain, 100 cakes of raisins,
Go on ahead. I'll follow you.
but she did not tell her husband Nabal. As she came riding her donkey into the mountain ravine, there were David and his men descending toward her, and she met them. David had just said,
It's been useless. All my watching over this fellow's property. May God deal with David, be it ever so severely, if by morning I leave alive one male of all who belong to him.
When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed down before David with her face to the ground. She fell at his feet and said,
Pardon your servant, my lord, and let me speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. Please, pay no attention, my lord, to that wicked man Nabal. He is just like his name. His name means fool, and folly goes with him. And as for me, your servant, I did not see the men my lord sent. And now, my lord, as surely as the Lord your God lives, and as you live, may your enemies and all who are intent on harming my lord be like Nabal. And let this gift which your servant has brought to my lord be given to the men who follow you. Please forgive your servant's presumption. The Lord your God will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my lord, because you live. Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my Lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling. When the Lord has fulfilled from over Israel, my Lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed or of having avenged himself. And when the Lord your God has brought my Lord success, remember your servant.
David said to Abigail,
Praise be to the Lord, and for keeping me from bloodshed this day, and from avenging myself with my own hands. Otherwise, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, who has kept me from harming you, if you had not come quickly to meet me, not one male belonging to Nabal would have been left alive by daybreak. Granted your request.
When Abigail went to Nabal, he was in the house holding a banquet like that of a king. He was in high spirits and very drunk, so she told him nothing at all until daybreak. Then, in the morning, when Nabal was sober, about 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said,
Praise be to the Lord, who has upheld my cause against Nabal for treating me with contempt.
Then David sent word to Abigail, asking her to become his wife. His servants went to Carmel and said to Abigail,
David has sent us to you, to take you to become his wife.
She bowed down with her face to the ground and said,
I am your servant, and am ready to serve you and walk.
And, attended by her 5 female servants, went with David's messengers and became his wife. David had also married Ahinoam of Jezreel, and they both were his wives. But Saul had given his daughter Michal, David's wife, to Paltiel, son
judgments which ye shall observe to do in the land which the Lord God of thy fathers giveth thee to possess it all the days that ye live upon the earth. Ye shall utterly destroy all the places wherein the nations which ye shall possess serve their gods, upon the high mountains, and upon the hills, and under every green tree. And ye shall hew down the graven images of their gods, and destroy the names of them out of that place. Ye shall not do so unto the Lord your God, but unto the place which the Lord your God shall choose out of all your tribes to put his name there, even unto his habitation shall ye seek, and thither thou shalt come. And thither ye shall bring your burnt offerings and your offerings, and the firstlings of your herds and of your flocks. And there ye shall eat before the Lord your God, and ye shall rejoice in all that ye put your hand unto, ye and your household, wherein the Lord thy God hath blessed thee. Ye shall not do after all the things that we do here this day, every man whatsoever is right in his own eye. Over Jordan, and dwell in the land which the Lord your God giveth you to inherit, and when he giveth you rest from all your enemies round about, so that ye dwell in safety, then there shall be a place which the Lord your God shall choose, to cause his name to dwell there. Thither shall ye bring all that I command you, your burnt offerings and your sacrifices, your tithes and the heave offering of your hand, and ye shall rejoice before the Lord your God, ye and your sons and your daughters, and your men servants and your maid servants, and the Levite that is within your gates, forasmuch as he hath no part nor inheritance with you. Take heed to thyself, that thou offer not thy burnt offerings in every place that thou seest, but in the place which the Lord shall choose in one of thy tribes, there thou shalt offer thy burnt offerings, and there to the blessing of the Lord thy God which he hath given thee. The unclean and the clean may eat thereof, as of the roebuck and as of the hart. Only ye shall not eat the blood, ye shall pour it upon the earth as water. Thou mayest not eat within which thou vowest, nor thy free will offerings or heave offering of thine hand, but thou must eat them before the Lord thy God, in the place which the Lord thy God shall choose, thou and thy son and thy daughter, and thy manservant and thy maidservant, and the Levite that is within thy gates. And thou shalt rejoice before the Lord thy God in all that thou hearest. When the Lord thy God shall enlarge thy border, as he hath promised thee, and thou shalt say, I will eat flesh, because thy soul longeth to eat flesh, thou mayest eat flesh, whatsoever thy soul lusteth after. If the place which the Lord thy God hath chosen to put his name there be too far from thee, then thou shalt kill of thy herd and of thy flock which the Lord hath given thee, as I have commanded thee, and thou shalt eat, and the unclean and the clean shall eat of them alike. Only be sure that thou eat not the blood, for the blood is the life, and thou mayest not eat the life with the flesh. Thou shalt not eat it, thou shalt pour it upon the earth as water. Thou shalt not eat it in the sight of the Lord. Only thy holy things which thou hast, and thy vows, thou shalt take and go unto the place which the Lord shall choose. And thou shalt offer thy burnt offerings, the flesh and the blood, upon the altar of the Lord thy God. And the blood of thy sacrifices shall be poured out upon the altar of the Lord thy God, and thou shalt eat the flesh. Observe and hear all these that which is good and right in the sight of the Lord thy God. When the Lord thy God shall cut off the nations from before thee whither thou goest to possess them, and thou succeedest them, and dwellest in their land, take heed to thyself that thou be not snared by following them, after that they be destroyed from before thee, and that thou inquire not after their gods, saying, How did these nations serve their gods? Even so will I do likewise. Thou shalt not do so unto the Lord thy God, for every abomination to the Lord which he hateth have they done unto their gods. For even their sons and their daughters they have burnt in the fire to their gods. What things soever I command you, observe to do it. Thou shalt not add thereto, nor diminish from it.
The horn is lifted high. My mouth boasts over my enemies, for I delight in your deliverance. There's no one holy like the Lord. There's no one besides you. There's no rock like our God. Do not keep talking so proudly or let your mouth speak such arrogance, for the Lord is a God who knows, and by him deeds are weighed. The bows of the warriors are broken, but those who stumbled are armed with strength. Those who were full hired themselves out for food, but those who were hungry are hungry no more. She who is barren has borne 7 children, but she who has had many sons pines away. The Lord brings death and makes alive. He exalts. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap. He seats them with princes and has them inherit a throne of honor. For the foundations of the earth are the Lord's. On them he has set the world. He will guard the feet of his faithful servants, but the wicked will be silenced in the place of God. He will thunder from heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed.
Then Elkanah went home to Ramah, but the boy ministered before the Lord under Eli the priest. Eli's sons were scoundrels. They had no regard for the Lord. Now it was the practice of the priests that whenever any of the people offered a sacrifice, the priest's servant would come with a three-pronged fork in his hand while the meat was being boiled, and would plunge the fork into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot. Whatever the fork brought up, the priest would take for himself. This is how they treated all the Israelites who came to Shiloh. But even before the fat was burned, the priest's servant would come and say to the person who was sacrificing,
Give the priest some meat to roast. He won't accept boiled meat from you, but only raw. Oh, hand it over now. If you don't, I'll take it by force.
This sin of the young men was very great in the Lord's sight, for they were treating the Lord's offering with contempt. But Samuel was ministering before the Lord. A boy woke and took it to him when she went up with her husband to offer the annual sacrifice. Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife, saying,
May the Lord give you children by this woman to take the place of the one she prayed for and gave to the Lord.
Then they would go home, 2 daughters. Meanwhile, the boy Samuel grew up in the presence of the Lord. Now Eli, who was very old, heard about everything his sons were doing to all Israel, and how they slept with the women who served at the entrance to the tent of meeting. So he said to them,
Why do you do this? No, my sons. The report I hear spreading among the Lord's people is not good. If anyone sins against another human being, God may mediate for the offender. But if anyone sins against
to their father's rebuke, for it was the Lord's will to put them to death. And the boy Samuel continued to grow in stature and in favor with the Lord and with people. Now a man of God came to Eli and said to him,
This is what the Lord says. Did I not clearly reveal myself to the family of out of all the tribes of Israel, to be my priest, to go up to my altar, to burn incense, and to wear an ephod in my presence? I also gave your ancestors' family all the food offerings presented by the Israelites. Why do you scorn my sacrifice and offering that I prescribed for my dwelling, of every offering made by my people Israel? Therefore, the Lord, the God of Israel, declares, I promised that the members of your family would minister before me forever. But now the Lord declares, me will be disdained. The time is coming when I will cut short your strength and the strength of the members of your family, so that no one in it will reach old age, and you will see distress in my dwelling. Although good will be done to Israel, no one knew that I do not cut off from serving at my altar. I will spare only to destroy your sight and sap your strength, and all your descendants will die in the prime of life. And what happens to your 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, will be a sign to you, myself, a faithful priest, who will do according to what is in my heart and mind. I will firmly establish his family line, and he will minister before my anointed one always. Then everyone left in your family line of bread and plead, appoint me to some priestly office so I can have food to eat.
David conferred with each of his officers, the commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds. He then said to the whole assembly of Israel,
If it seems good to you, and if it is the will of the Lord our God, let us send word far and wide to the rest of our people throughout the territories of Israel, and also to the priests and Levites who are with them in their towns and pasture lands to come and join us. Let us bring the ark of our God back to us, for we did not inquire of it during the reign of Saul.
So David assembled all Israel from the Shihor River in Egypt to Lebo-Hamath to bring the ark of God from Kiriath-Jearim. David and all Israel went to Baalah of Judah, Kiriath-Jearim, to bring up from there. That is called by the name. They moved the ark of God from Abinadab's house on a new cart, with Uzzah and Ahio guiding it. David and all the Israelites were celebrating with all their might before God, with songs and with harps, lyre and piping. Uzzah reached out his hand to steady the ark, because the oxen stumbled. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah, and he struck him down because he had put his hand on the ark. So he died there before God, Uzzah. And to this day that place is called Perez Uzzah. David was afraid of God that day and asked,
"How can I ever bring the ark of God to me?"
He did not take the ark to be with him in the city of David. Instead, he took it to the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite. The ark of God remained with his household and everything he had.
One day, Peter and John were going up to the temple at the time of prayer, at 3 p.m. Now a man who was lame from birth was being carried to the temple gate called Beautiful,
I beg of you.
where he was put every day to beg from those going into the temple courts. When he saw Peter and John about to enter, as did John, then Peter said,
"Look at us."
So the man gave them his attention, expecting to get something from them. Then Peter said,
"Silver or gold I do not have, but what I do have I give you."
By the right hand, he helped him up, and instantly the man's feet and ankles became strong. He jumped to his feet and began to walk. Then he went with them into the temple courts, walking and jumping and praising God. Same man who used to sit begging at the temple gate called Beautiful. And they were filled with wonder and amazement at what had happened to them. While the man held on to Peter and John, all the people were astonished and came running to them in the place called Solomon's Colonnade. When Peter saw this, he said to them,
"People of Israel, why thus, as if by our own power or godliness, we have made this man walk? The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of our fathers, has glorified his servant Jesus. You handed him over to be killed, and you disowned him before Pilate. Though he had decided to let him go, you disowned the holy and righteous one. But God raised him from the dead. We are witnesses of this. By faith in
He put the Gibeonites to death.
The king summoned the Gibeonites and spoke to them. Now the Gibeonites were not a part of Israel, but were survivors of the Amorites. The Israelites had sworn to spare them, but Saul in his zeal for Israel and Judah had tried to annihilate them. David asked the Gibeonites,
"What shall I do for you? How shall I make atonement so that you will bless the Lord's inheritance?"
Saul or his family, nor do we have the right to put anyone in Israel to death.
2CM and the Hi-Fi Home Service, broadcasting to the nations.
On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. And the Lord, old cross, where the dearest and best for a world of lost sinners was lost. Till my trophies at last I lay down, I will plead and exchange it someday for a crown. Oh, that old rugged world has a wondrous song. For the dear Lamb of God left his glory above to bear it to dark Calvary. So we'll cherish the old rugged cross. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a cross. Never be true, its shame and reproach gladly bear. Then he'll call me someday to my home far away, where his glory forever rugged cross, till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown.
This was the allotment for the tribe of Manasseh as Joseph's firstborn, who had received Gilead and Bashan, because the Machirites were great soldiers. So this allotment was for the rest of the people of Manasseh, the clans of Abiezer, Helek, Asriel, Shechem, Hepher, and Shemida. These are the other male Dishad, son of Hepher, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, had no sons, but only daughters, whose names were Mahlah, Noah, Haglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. They went to Eleazar the priest, Joshua son of Nun, and the leaders, and said,
The Lord commanded Moses,
along with the brothers of their father, according to the Lord's command. Manasseh's share consisted of 10 tracts of land besides Gilead and Bashan east of the Jordan, because the daughters of the tribe of Manasseh received an inheritance among the sons. The land of Gilead belonged to the rest of the descendants of there, to include the people living in Tappuah. Manasseh had the land of Tappuah, but Tappuah itself on the boundary of Manasseh belonged to the Ephraimites. Then the boundary continued south to the Cana ravine. There were towns belonging to Ephraim lying among the towns of Manasseh. But the boundary of Manasseh was the northern side of the ravine and ended at the to Manasseh. The territory of Manasseh reached the Mediterranean Sea and bordered Asher on the north and Issachar on the east. Within Issachar and Asher, Manasseh also had Bethshan, Ibleam, and the people of Dor, Endor, Teunach, and Megiddo, together with their surrounding settlement, not able to occupy these towns, for the Canaanites were determined to live in that region. However, when the Israelites grew stronger, they subjected the Canaanites to forced labor, but did not drive them out completely. The people of Joseph said to Joshua,
Why have you given us only one allotment and one portion for an inheritance?
Joshua answered,
And if the hill country of Ephraim is too small for you, go up into the forest and clear land for yourselves there in the land of the Perizzites and Rephaites.
The people of Joseph replied,
The hill country is not enough for us, and all the Canaanites who live in the plain have chariots fitted with iron, both those in Bashan.
House of Joseph, to Ephraim and Manasseh.
You are numerous and very powerful. You will have not only one allotment, but the forested hill country as well. Clear it, and its farthest limits will be yours. Though the Canaanites have chariots fitted with iron, and though they are strong, you can drive them out.
I have a friend who abides in my heart. Oh, what a wonderful Savior. I cannot live from his Savior. Oh, what a wonderful Savior is He! Wonder of wonders, that He should love me. Someday His glorious face I shall see. Oh, what a wonderful Savior! He will the vilest of sinners forgive. Oh, what a wonderful Savior! No, oh, what a wonderful Savior! Oh, what a wonderful Savior is He! Wonder of wonders, that someday His glorious face I shall see. Oh, what a wonderful Savior!
Jesus left there and went to his hometown accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed.
Where did this man get these things?
They asked.
What is this wisdom that has been given him? What are these remarkable miracles?
And the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us?
And they took offense at him. Jesus said to them,
Only in their own towns, among their relatives, and in their...
Could not do any miracles there, except lay his hands on a few sick people and heal them. He was amazed at their lack of faith. Then Jesus went around teaching from village to village. Calling the 12 to him, he began to send them out 2 by 2, and gave them authority over evil spirits.
No bread, no bag, no money in your belts. Wear sandals, but not an extra shirt. Whenever you enter a house, stay there until you leave that town. And if any place will not welcome you or listen to you, shake the dust off your feet when you leave as a testimony against them.
They went out and preached that people should repent to them. King Herod heard about this, for Jesus' name had become well known. Some were saying,
John the Baptist has been raised from the dead, and that is why miraculous powers are at work in him.
He is a prophet, like one of the prophets of long ago.
But when Herod heard this, he said,
John, whom I beheaded, has been raised from the dead.
For Herod himself had given orders to have John arrested, and he had him bound and put in prison. He did this because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, whom he brother's wife. So Herodias nursed a grudge against John and wanted to kill him. But she was not able to, because Herod feared John and protected him, knowing him to be a righteous and holy man. When Herod heard John, he was greatly puzzled, yet he liked to listen to him. Finally, the opportune time came. When the daughter of Herodias came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his dinner guests. The king said to the girl,
Ask me for anything you want, and I'll give it to you.
And he promised her with an oath.
Whatever you ask.
Out and said to her mother,
What shall I ask for?
The head of John the Baptist,
she answered. At once the girl hurried in to the king with a request.
I want you to give me, right now.
He was greatly distressed, but because of his oaths and his dinner guests, he did not want to refuse her. So he immediately sent an executioner with orders to bring John's head. The man went, beheaded John in the prison, and brought back his head on a platter. He presented it to the girl. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them,
Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and to get some rest.
So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. By this time, it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him.
This is a remote place and it's already
Eat. But he answered,
You give them something to eat.
They said to him,
That would take almost a year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat?
How many loaves do you have?
He asked.
Go and see.
When they found out, they said,
5 and 2 fish.
Then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. He gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples to set before the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida, while he dismissed the crowd. After leaving them, he went up on a mountainside to pray. When evening came, the boat was in the middle of the lake, and he was alone on land. He saw the disciples straight on the lake. He was about to pass by them, but when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost. They cried out because they all saw him and were terrified. Immediately, he spoke to them and said,
Take courage. Don't be afraid.
Then he climbed into the boat with them as the wind stood about the loaves. Their hearts were hardened. When they had crossed over, they landed at Gennesaret and anchored there. As soon as they got out of the boat, people recognized Jesus. They ran throughout that whole region and carried the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. And wherever he went, into villages, towns, or countryside, they placed the sick, and all who touched him were healed.
So Isaac called for Jacob and blessed him. Then he commanded him,
Do not marry a Canaanite woman. Go at once to Paddan Aram, to the house of your mother's father, Bethuel. Take a wife for your daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful, and increase your numbers until you become a community of peoples. May he give you and your descendants the blessing given to Abraham, so that you may take possession of the land where you now reside as a foreigner, the land God gave to Abraham.
Then Isaac sent Jacob on his way, who was the mother of Jacob and Esau. Now Esau learned that Isaac had blessed Jacob and had sent him to Paddan Aram to take a wife from there, and that when he blessed him, he commanded him, Do not marry a Canaanite woman, and that Jacob had obeyed his father and mother and had gone to Paddan Aram. He went to Ishmael and married Mahalath, the sister of Nebaioth, and daughter of Ishmael, son of Abraham, in addition to the wives he already had. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it resting on the earth, with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, and he said,
I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your the earth, and you will spread out to the west, and to the east, to the north, and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you.
When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought,
Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it.
He was afraid and said,
How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven.
Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called that place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. Then Jacob made a vow, saying,
If God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I am taking and will give me food to eat, it will be my God. And this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give you a tenth.
The book of Genesis, it's a great evangelism tool. Answers with Ken Ham, whose ministry has opened a large creation museum near Cincinnati, Ohio. It really is fascinating that some missionary organizations, including New Tribes Mission, did. So now they start with the book of Genesis and explain where people came from, what happened in the Garden of Eden with sin, and therefore why Jesus came to die on a cross for their sins. And once this was all explained, these people fully understood the gospel. Many committed their lives to the Lord. You know, it's important to realize there's not much difference between approaching pagan cultures with the gospel and heart from God. They don't fully understand the message of the cross until we take them back to Genesis. We'd like to help you better understand why it's so important to defend the Bible from its very first verse. Call us and receive a copy of our new pocket guide on the Bible and make a donation of any amount today. Call us toll 89 followed by the word answers, or order this 96-page guidebook when you go to our website of answersoffer.org.
Chapter 31. And Moses went and spake these words unto all Israel. And he said unto them, I am 120 years old this day. I can no more. The Lord thy God, he will go over before thee, as the Lord had said. And the Lord shall do unto them as he did to Sihon and to Og, kings of the Amorites, and unto the land of them whom he destroyed. And the Lord shall give them up before your face, that ye may do unto them according unto all the commandments which I have commanded you. Be strong and of a good courage. Fear not, nor be afraid of them. For the Lord thy God, he it is that doth go with thee. In the sight of all Israel, be strong and of a good courage. For thou must go with this people unto the land which the Lord hath sworn unto their fathers to give them, and thou shalt cause them to inherit it. And the Lord, he it is that doth go before thee. He will be with thee. He will not fail thee, neither forsake thee. Fear not, neither be dismayed. And Moses wrote this law, and delivered it unto the priests, the sons of Levi, which bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and unto all the elders of Israel. And Moses commanded them, saying, At the 7 years, in the solemnity of the year of release, in the place which he shall choose, thou shalt read this law before all Israel in their hearing. Gather the people together, men and women and children, and thy stranger that is within thy gates, that they may hear and that they may learn, and fear the Lord your God, and observe to do all the words, and learn to fear the Lord your God, as long as ye live in the land whither ye go over Jordan to possess it. And the Lord said unto Moses, Behold, thy days approach that thou must die. Call Joshua, and present yourselves in the tabernacle of the congregation, that I may give him a charge. And Moses and Joshua went and presented themselves in the tabernacle of the door of the tabernacle. And the Lord said unto Moses, Behold, thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, and this people will rise up and go a-whoring after the gods of the strangers of the land, whither they go to be among them, and will forsake me and break my covenant which I have made with them. Then my anger shall be kindled against them in that day, and I will forsake them, and so that they will say in that day, Are not these evils come upon us because our God is not among us? And I will surely hide my face in that day for all the evils which they shall have wrought, in that they are turned unto other gods. Now therefore, write ye this song for you, and teach it the children of Israel. Put it in their mouth, which I swear unto their fathers, that floweth with milk and honey, and they shall have eaten and filled themselves and waxen fat. Then will they turn unto other gods and serve them, and provoke me, and break my covenant. And it shall come to pass, when many evils and troubles are befallen them, that this song shall testify against them as a witness. For it shall not be forgotten out of the mouths of their seed. For I know their imagination which they go about, even now, before I have brought them into the land which I swear. And he gave Joshua the son of Nun a charge, and said, Be strong and of a good courage, for thou shalt bring the children of Israel into the land which I swear unto them, and I will be with thee. And it came to pass, when Moses had made an end of writing the words of this law in a book until they were finished, that Moses commanded the Levites which bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord, saying, may be there for a witness against thee. For I know thy rebellion and thy stiff neck. Behold, while I am yet alive with you this day, ye have been rebellious against the Lord of your tribes and your officers, that I may speak these words in their ears, and call heaven and earth to record against them. For I know that after my death ye will utterly corrupt yourselves, and turn aside from the way which I have commanded you, and evil will befall you in the latter days, because ye will do evil in the sight of the Lord, to provoke him to anger through the work of your hands. And Moses spake in the ears of all the congregation of Israel the words of this song until they were ended.
The Book of Ruth. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while with me. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab and lived there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living, and 2 daughters-in-law.
Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness, as you have shown kindness to your dead and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband.
Then she...
Your people.
But Naomi said,
Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until it is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me.
At this, they wept aloud again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her.
Look,
said Naomi,
your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods.
Go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me.
When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. So the 2 women went on until they came to Beth, exclaimed,
Can this be Naomi?
Don't call me Naomi.
She told them,
Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me.
So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth, the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem.
Who can cheer the heart like Jesus? By his presence all divine, true and tender, pure and precious. Oh, how blessed to call him mine. Oh, that thrills my soul is Jesus. The fairest of 10,000, in my blessed Lord I see. Love of Christ so freely given, grace of God beyond degree. People see, oh, that thrills my soul is fairest of 10,000 I see. By the crystal flowing river, with the ransomed I will sing. Praise and glorify the King. All that thrills my soul is Jesus. He is more than life to me. And in my blessed Lord I see. All that thrills my soul is Jesus. He is more than life to me. And the fairest of 10,000.
Now the Philistines fought against Israel. The Israelites fled before them, and many fell dead on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines were in hot pursuit of Saul and his sons, and when the archers overtook him, they wounded him critically. Saul said to his armor-bearer,
"Draw your sword and run me through, and these uncircumcised fellows will come and run me through and abuse me."
But his armor-bearer was terrified and would not was dead. He too fell on his sword and died with him. So Saul and his 3 sons and his armor-bearer and all his men died together that same day. When the Israelites along the valley and those across the Jordan set towns and fled, and the Philistines came and occupied them. The next day, when the Philistines came to strip the dead, they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. They cut off his head and stripped off the temple of their idols and among their people. They put his armor in the temple of the Ashtoreths and fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. When the people of Jabesh Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, all their valiant men marched through the night to Bethshan. They took down the bodies of Saul and his sons from the wall of Bethshan and went to Jabesh, where they burned them. Then they took their bones and buried them under a tamarisk tree at Jabesh, and they fasted 7 days.
Everywhere you go, there's radio. Wherever you go, radio. At home, the beach, wherever you are, radio entertains you near and far. Wherever you go, there is radio.
Broadcasting as it used to sound in the golden days of radio. This program looks back on the early years of on-air entertainment. Many who grew up in Australia before the launch of television will remember their favourite stations and personalities. It's hoped that those who misrepresent in this series. But caution, listeners should realise that references in recorded segments to time calls and commercial information does not necessarily apply today.
Whether you're at work or in your car, at home, near and far, wherever you go, there is radio.
Hello there, everyone. Welcome once again to Australian Radio Review. Well, in a previous edition of this program, some on-air checks. In particular, we heard him doing a request program on 3CR Community Radio, which is very interesting because that was recorded in 1979, at least 10 years after he was on commercial radio. We then heard an obituary, which was printed in the Herald newspaper, about Grantley D having died after. We said that we would continue on with some more reflections on Grantley and talk about his work and life, and we'll do that in this edition of Australian Radio Review. Now we have another obituary, which I think we should read because it's a little bit more detailed than the previous one. And then we'll go on to some other features. Never heard of him? Doesn't know anything about him? Well, listen to this and you'll pick up quite a lot.
From the Herald Sun, Friday, February 18, 2005. DJ, entertainment legend. Born January 2, 1946. Died February 7, 2005. The handicap that Grantley has carried with him all his life was never easy to overcome. People to have the courage needed to make a success of their lives. These words by Hall of Fame inductee Stan Rolfe sum up the life and character of Grantley D, a blind entertainer who broke down barriers in Windsor to Mary and John DeSutti. His parents managed hotels in Albert Park and Essendon, and in 1958 bought the news agency in Belmore Road, Baldwin. Grantley attended kindergarten and school at the Royal Victorian Institute for the Blind until he was 10. Then he attended St. Paul's School for the Blind at Kew. He was then a student at St. Edmund's Boarding School for the Blind in Sydney until he was 16. Since kindergarten, his principal goal was to be a radio announcer. He was fascinated by radio and popular music. Brother Cornell of St. Paul's provided additional personalized tuition for singing, poetry, and public speaking. Brother Cornell entered Grantley in many Esterfords and Australia's Amateur Hour, which he won together with many Esterford trophies. When Grantley was 16, Brother Cornell recommended he return to Melbourne for further studies at the Conservatorium of Music. However, as his heart was in popular music, he started tuition with Jack White at the Sutton's Building in Elizabeth Street, Melbourne. In 1958, he on 3UZ. He won the award for the Act of the Night and was invited to be a regular guest tipster on Bert Bryant's Turf Talk. This was the start of his career as an announcer. While performing at the Lions Sportsman Star Maker Breakfast at the Southern Cross Hotel, heard by a Sun journalist. An article was published and caught the eye of 3AK manager David Joseph. With the help of Stan Rolfe, whom he had met at 1963 and submitted to 3AK. At about the same time, Grantley started to attend Ziegfeld's in Hawthorne to dance and was entered in the Beat the Champ singing contest. He won for 16 contests, the start of his singing career. Grantley had gigs at Menton Town Hall with Colin Cook, Merv Benton, and the Sapphires. Compere Brian de Courcy suggested his name be shortened to D, making it easier to, and it engaged Grantley as a novelty. He would be the youngest blind DJ in the world. The first record Grantley played on 3AK was the Cascades' Rhythm of the Rain. He was on air 3 hours each Sunday on turntable 63. The audience reaction was fantastic and time slot. He soon had his own show, The Grantley D Show, and provided very strong competition for the ratings. In late 1963, the 3AK Good Guys concept was introduced by David Joseph. This concept involved Grantley, Lionel York, Malcolm Sir, Bill Howie, Jeff Hiscox, Peter C., and Robert B. One day, while broadcasting, the studio door opened and Graham Kennedy introduced himself to Grantley, saying if, at any time, he needed a sounding board to contact him. Regular performances on In Melbourne Tonight began soon after this meeting. A highlight of his career at 3AK was to co-host on radio the Beatles tour in Melbourne. He attended the concerts and their suite in the Southern Cross to conduct interviews. After a long night, John Lennon even cooked him a marinated steak. By 17, Grantley was being broadcast 7 days a week. With the potential for a format change, Grantley departed 3AK for 7EX in Launceston, where he remained for about 9 months. Grantley had a seeing eye dog from the Lady Nell Seeing Eye Dog School. It took 4 weeks of training for Grantley and Penny, the Golden Labrador, to become a very tight duo. Together they would attend radio school, shorthand classes, typing lessons, and do it all on public transport to maintain their independence. Penny was regularly with Grantley when he performed and was unperturbed by the locations or the volume of the music. Some nights Grantley performed at 4 venues. His business arrangements were handled by his father, who was known as the oldest rocker in the business. In the mid-60s, Chris Weeks took over his management. Grantley toured with Mark Winter, Jerry and the Pacemakers. He also shared the stage with Johnny O'Keefe, the Bee Gees, Oliver Newton-John, and Johnny Chester. In 1966, O'Keefe, a mate, arrived at the 3AK studio and told Grantley he had arranged a recording session for him the next day. At Armstrong Studios with the Strangers, Grantley recorded his biggest hit, Let the Little Girl Dance. The female backing on the track is John Farrar and Grantley singing falsetto. Let the Little Girl Dance entered the charts on May 14, 1966, and initially sold just 250 copies short of gold records. This recording success led to a substantial increase in live performances, and he appeared on Commotion, Bandstand, In Melbourne Tonight, 6 O'Clock Rock, and The Graham Kennedy Show on September 16, 1966. It was followed by You Are 16, initially recorded by Johnny Burnett. This recording made the charts on January 7, 1967, and was followed by We Must Be Doing Something Right, 1968, a duo with Little Patty. Grantley was performing every night of the week at hotels and clubs, as well as keeping his radio commitments. During the 80s, he started performing. In 1991, he featured in Rockin' Back the Clock at the Melbourne Concert Hall. Grantley and the All-Stars also performed at the Last Great 60s show at Festival Hall and many festivals. During this period, the frequency of his performances fell as his health deteriorated. This obituary was written by Ian Allen.
You're listening to Australian Radio Review on your hi-fi service 2CM. When the news broke about Grantley's death, there was a great reaction, especially from the media. Radio announcers he'd been doing what's happened As far as I know, there was never any cause of death reported, only the fact that he had been in a nursing home, hadn't been well for quite some time. Let's present some air checks now so you can hear how different personalities and the public responded at the time. Most of that is there for discussion, interviews, talks, questions, etc. Grantley himself was an occasional caller to the all-night show on 3AW. This program was conducted by Keith McGowan, and he and Grantley were friends, and so Grantley would sometimes give a call in. Another person who was an associate of Grantley in one way or another, knew him for many, many years. Clark usually called in once a week to Keith and talked about the media and radio news and topics like that. So it wasn't surprising when the news came through about Grantley, he got Clark Sinclair on the line in the middle of the night or early and so on. So we're going to have a listen to some of that now. And I might mention that since this recording was made, both Clark Sinclair and Keith McGowan have both passed away themselves. Anyway, let's hear some air checks now from 3AW, recorded in February 2000.
For midnight. Clark Sinclair has known Grantley for all those years. Morning, Clark.
Morning, Keith.
Pretty ordinary day, eh?
Very sad morning.
But we have had some indication that this was on. But hello, Keith. Very sorry to hear of the passing of Grantley D. I didn't know him personally, but he was one of those people in my memory for as long as I can remember. These days, 59 is pretty young to be heading off to the next adventure. Sorry to hear that he'd been unwell in his latter years. I still hear his records on various stations a bit different, had a smile in it. That's true, isn't it, actually?
Yes.
His voice did have a smile. Yes. Strong voice. A sad event. R.I.P. Grantley. Hi, Keith. It's just a sad day to hear that Grantley has passed away. I have good memories of Grantley. We used to drive him and his girlfriend, which girlfriend, to dance, and he was at Moorabbin Town Hall. That's from Dion at Noble Park. Had a lot of mates, Grantley, didn't he?
Yes, he did. And I first met up with Grantley at the Victoria Royal Return Institute for the Blind, and he was a little boy that always wanted to sing and always wanted to be a radio here at the radio school at 3SA. And he was very good because he just had that natural flair for radio. And he, while he was here, there was a story in the Herald Sun about him, and the came on board, who was managing a lot of groups and bands at the time, and of course he was program manager at 3AK, and when in the years you said before of the good guys, and David Johnson came online, and David Joseph came online and put him into 3AK, and he was really, there've been blind radio announcers before, but he was really the first blind radio disc jockey. And he worked for 3AK all those years as the 3AK good guys, and of course he made records. And then when he finished at 3AK, I moved him to 70X Launceston. And he
I've forgotten about that.
Yes, and he wowed them in Tasmania. Absolutely wowed them in Tasmania. They loved him over at 70X.
How long was he down there for?
Oh, and it just went on from one success to one after the other. And he had a very busy life and a couple of marriages, and he has children.
Years.
It has, yes. It hasn't been a good time for him. But he always wanted to sing, and he always wanted to be a radio DJ. And
but a lady called Jan, as I recall. I hope I got the name right. But she has been what's the word? An anchor.
Yeah.
A great help to.
Sad loss, because he certainly goes
too young.
Well,
59,
yes, he certainly goes down in radio history as being a radio DJ, and he goes down in history as being a top rock and roll singer.
Yeah. But more importantly than all of that stuff, he goes down as being a pretty good fella and a lot of fun to be with.
Yes, yes.
From 3AK. From Bill Howie from 3AK back then. But we entertain ourselves telling Grantley D stories. I mean, the stories of Grantley, of course, are legendary.
Oh, yes.
And nobody knows more of them than what Bill Howie
and Grantley.
I mean, there's stories like Grantley D going into the technical area and pushing buttons and turning knobs and dials and stuff on transmitters.
Yes, exactly. But he was out so outgoing. I mean, he didn't see anything as being a problem to him. If it was a problem, he'd beat it. He'd get over it. And he's at the stadium with some of the big talents from overseas. And he worked all over Australia, of course.
I remember one Sunday night we put him on at St. Pat's down in Fremantle. 18 million people turned up.
Yeah,
to a dance that got 300 or 400 every Sunday night, and socks and all that stuff. But we got some.
But he took
plenty of good. I loved it.
He took all that in good fun. He just loved all that, and he was very appreciative of what you've done for him over the years too, because and
no, I've done nothing.
Particularly in Perth, when you had him on air at 6PR and so on. He has a sister. I'm not quite sure where she is, but he does have a sister. But it's a very sad day for Grantley.
Well, for us too.
And for us.
He's gone to his grave knowing that we're a chance to do something this year.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, mate.
Righto.
See ya. Bye. Clark Sinclair there, talking about Grantley D. Bev at Glen Waverley. Morning, Bev.
Hi, Keith.
How are you, Bev?
Oh, good, thank you. And you?
Couldn't be better, Bev.
Yeah, I just want to make a tribute once.
Yeah.
And you probably go back to when I did meet him. I can't remember. It was about the 70s. And it was, remember the Embers nightclub in Toorak?
Mm-hmm.
And was he totally... Well, I was sitting with my girlfriend with table for two.
He still was able to find girls.
Yes, and indeed, where she was, I can't remember, but he sat down and talked to me. Actually, he was with Lionel Rose at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Lionel was the prime of his life then, too. And he described me, Grantley, and I thought, oh, this dark skin, olive skin, and dark eyes and auburn hair. And I did. He described me accurately.
Might have been me who'd previously told him what you looked like.
And such a lovely young man.
Yeah, to Grantley, health-wise, but
what happened to him?
He's at peace now. He's at peace now.
Was it cancer? Or?
Oh, no, it wasn't cancer. But he wasn't a well man. Okay.
Thank you.
All the best. Bye. At Paran.
Look, I'd like to say that I'm very sorry for the loss. Yeah, absolutely. And for you too, Keith. I can hear the grief in your voice. But I'll tell you what, I had a lovely experience once. I met Grantley D, and it was through a friend of mine. And he said the funniest thing, and he'd say to me, "Come here, girl." He said, "Let me see who I'm talking to." And he wanted to feel my face.
Yeah.
And I thought that was the loveliest gesture.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But it was so funny, though. It was all in grand times, and all was fun. But it was so lovely. And honestly, yeah, it is a great loss when you lose such lovely people. Like
59 years of age
I know,
he was.
only too young, isn't it?
Well, it is very young.
It is to everybody concerned. Absolutely. Okay, Keith. I
Okay.
don't want to take up much more time.
Okay.
Good night, love.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
It is 8 minutes to 5, 3AW, with Joy at Coburg. Morning, Joy.
Morning. I just wanted to say, I mentioned you, I heard you mention Grantley a couple of nights ago. I woke up at 4, and most of the list, his grandfather and my father were brothers, but I had never met him.
Right.
So,
Well, you would have followed his career, though.
yes, I've heard, from time to time, but it gave me quite a shock, really. Yes. Well, thank you, and Thank you very much.
Thanks for calling.
Good.
Bye. Shirley.
At Grantley D. They used to go around all the Bayside beaches
Yes.
entertaining,
Yes.
and they were on a yacht called the Margadell, and this particular night they called into St Leonard's, and we were on board, and there was Lionel York at the time with him. Was it the 3AK?
Well, it sounds like it was in that 3AK era.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Keith. Was it the 3AK Good Guys?
3AK Good Guys, that's right.
Yes, and I had the pleasure of meeting him that night, and he was only very, very young.
Extremely young when he was extremely popular on the radio here in Melbourne. Quite right. I was, I was 22 or something in Perth. Just turned 21, 22 in Perth. So
Very young.
that's right.
I can remember, and I think it wasn't long after that Lionel York went to Perth.
Oh, yeah. He went. I was in Perth 64 to 68. I reckon Lionel York went there in the early 70s. Anyway, thanks for the call, Shirley.
Okay.
Thank you for your tribute. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. A tribute to Grantley D. Grantley D, who had been unwell for some days and dangerously unwell just before midnight. 96, 96, 12, 78, Shrove Tuesday, 2005, the day we learned of the passing of Grantley D just before midnight last night. John at Chadstone. Morning, John.
Good morning, Keith. Yeah, just a couple of quick Range Road in Point Huntley, and I used to pick him up for a dance when we were flagging in numbers down there. We'd pick him up and driving down there, and we'd give him a shirt. That's all he ever would take, is a shirt. He had nothing to do. We'd pick him up some Sunday nights, and he'd just want to come and sit and listen there, and he'd find out about years. He got killed on the way to our dance one night in Warrigal Road, and it was a sad night that night, but he was wrapped in Daryl Cashmore, and he I don't know if a lot of people knew Daryl Cashmore, but if he knew what he was singing there, he'd want to come and just sit there and listen. And I've not long woken up, and it's sad for me. Very sad.
Thanks for the call, John.
Okay.
All the best. John at Chadstone.
At Grantley, the Howie brothers, we did quite a lot of work with him. Probably not in the last 5 years, but before that, we did quite a lot of.
Well, he didn't do much in the last 5 years, really, did he? No. I mean, I know he did a show there not so long ago at the Moorabbin Town Hall, and now I wish I had gone to it. But but I did.
The humour, I think I remember that. I remember his really earthy sense of humour, and loved a joke, and just a really good bloke, and. Had a really good voice too. I always really enjoyed backing Grantley because he could really beat a song out,
He had a strong voice for a little fella, didn't he?
He did, yeah. No, it's really sad to hear that Grantley's this morning.
Well, Grantley's life, the quality of his life hadn't been all that good for a little while, and then it culminated in him being admitted to hospital. Yeah, and then Grantley at peace and at rest from about 11 o'clock last night.
Yeah, okay.
Where were some of the places that you backed Grantley, John?
Probably just places like, it used to be called the East Ringwood Sports Club. I think we might have done a show with him there at one stage, in the Park region, just can't remember particular venues, but always enjoyed backing him, and always had a good sense of humour, and just a good bloke.
That's exactly what he was. Thanks, John. Brendan Scott. Morning, Brendan.
Morning to you, Keith. Terrible news. Knew Grantley only for a short time compared to others. About 15 years ago, I went to a dance at what used to be Patroni's down in Keysborough there, and Grantley was on the bill with a whole bunch of others, and Stan was very kind to take me backstage and meet Grantley D, and I think we sat with him for about 2 hours that particular night, and what struck me about him was his extraordinary memory. I'd been, singing songs with you on the radio for quite some years by that stage, and I mean, Grantley would be able to mention certain songs and tell me what night I sang them at what time and in what key. I mean, it was quite mind blowing. But he always had a very strong interest in my career after that. Good on you, mate.
All the best, mate. Bye.
You're listening to Australian Radio Review on your hi-fi service 2CM.
What to give for Mother's Day? Here's what mothers have to say.
Give us better slippers Mother's Day.
Mother's Day. See wonderful gleaming slippers in the golden gift box by Better, just $39.11.
There are cattle stations. There are train hi-fi service right round Australia.
Later on the same day, we go over to the Ernie Sigley show, and Ernie is speaking with the newsreader David Armstrong.
How are you, David Armstrong?
Very 21 years.
Did you, you'd remember Grantley, do you?
I know the name and I know of the heritage. I've never met Grantley, I never had met Grantley, but I know how important he was to radio and entertainment in Melbourne. Very sad to hear of his passing overnight.
Yes, How old was he, did they say?
59.
Is that all?
59, I think, yes.
He hadn't been well for a while. He used to ring me up a few times. And
well, I know we had a number of calls, yes. Keith McGowan was right across that overnight when I came in. That was all they were talking about.
Yeah.
Very sad.
Yeah, blind disc jockey, worked at 3AK in the days of the good guys, you know, and really a nice man down at Moorabbin, behind the coals. And I'm yelling out, and he said, "Oh, ease off, Ernie." And I didn't know it was him, it was Grantley. I said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "I come to footy every week." I said, "But you can't see anything." He said, "Doesn't matter." He said, "I have a ball."
Enjoy the emotion of it.
Yeah, he did. You know, he's lovely little bloke. He was a good singer too. All right, good on you, David.
You have a great day.
Died. I hadn't seen Grantley for a long time, but incredible sense of humour.
She never danced before. Later on the floor.
Grantley D, who passed away aged 59 overnight, and our thoughts and condolences to the friends and family of Grantley. We replay a little of an interview we did about 6-7 years ago.
Yes, back in 1997.
And now we're listening to Philip Brady and Bruce Bansfield on AW's Nightline, and they're about to speak to Grantley.
10 on 3AW, and we've been having a chat of recent weeks to many of the artists who'll be appearing in the 60s Superstars at the Melbourne Sports and Entertainment Centre. The rock and roll icons of Bobby and Laurie, and Johnny Young, Doug Parkinson.
Oh, yes, there'll be Rusty Wiley and Marcy Jones and the Thunderbirds.
Denise Drysdale and Peter Doyle.
And also the Virgil Brothers.
And Buddy England and Colin Cook. And among them is Grantley D. Good evening, Grantley.
Good evening.
How are things going?
Fine.
Where are you tonight? Are you performing anywhere?
No, I'm speaking to you from home. And just as a quick little trivia quiz, you were talking about telly just a little while ago. Brief program with Good evening.
Alfred Hitchcock.
Absolutely.
Yes, he did, didn't he? Tonight, there's a story of intrigue and mystery. What is it?
Yourself these days, Grantley?
Well, Phil, I'm doing a lot of singing and that in various clubs and wherever, and we're really enjoying it.
Do you think it was because you were blind that you were sort of inspired to become an entertainer? And I'm wondering if people like Stevie Wonder...
I couldn't speak for Stevie or Jose or any of those guys, but from my point of view, I really haven't given it any great degree of thought, I've got to tell you.
I would tend to think that maybe radio, because you would have listened so intently and to every nuance and word and jingle and commercial, I think that led you into it, wouldn't it? That love of radio?
And you mentioning commercials just reminded me to point something out to you. I don't know whether you two are aware of it or not, but I would probably be one of, if not your most regular listener. And I was listening, as is my habit of a Sunday night, to Remember When. And what did I hear in one of your many montages of old commercials? But go well, go Shell, it's a good feeling.
Yes, and that's you.
Here's a moi.
Every time I hear it, I think of you. I think somebody else said it was a Sydney entertainer, but no, it was Grantley D.
Absolutely.
Did you do a lot of those singing commercials, Grantley?
Did a heap of them, Phil. Coca-Cola commercials, Sparkling Rheingold commercials, lots of others. I used to love them.
Do a Sparkling Rheingold commercial.
Sparkling Rheingold tonight. I can't remember the rest.
No, it didn't sell.
Wasn't a bad drop, though.
Radio is big. It's with the people. Everyone listens to radio.
At least 2 cents in every family.
And radio's growing in popularity.
Radio is big. And mother listen.
Everyone listens to radio.
You're listening to Australian Radio Review on 2CM, your hi-fi service. And in this program, we have been dealing with the passing of Grantley D in 2004 years earlier than that, when 3AK celebrated their 70th birthday. They were originally established in 1931, so 2001 would have been their 70th. Gavin Woods hosted a 2-part series running several hours, and it involves a lot of personalities over the years who have been connected with 3AK. Hopefully we'll be able to make a big feature of this program because it covers quite a lot of personalities of interest. But it's a bit too much for us to take on right now. So what we'll do is we'll pick out the part that deals with Grantley that would probably be fitting for the theme of this program. So let's go now to 3AK.
70 years young tonight. Of course, this Sunday at 5 p.m, Yvonne Lawrence and Clark Sinclair will be doing a 1-hour special looking at the history of 3AK from the 1930s until the 50s. But tonight we've got 3 hours, a 3-hour special. We're speaking to lots of people tonight, including Bert Newton, Brian Naylor, and we're paying homage to the 70 years of the ups and downs of 3AK.
Thank you.
And Grantley B, another good guy on the line. Grantley, welcome. You're a hard man to find, but I persevered, and thanks to everyone who called me and gave me. Says, well, you were very young at 3AK, weren't you?
Firstly, before I say anything at all, Gav, let me just say one thing that none of the others have actually said. It is an absolute honour and a privilege to be talking in this particular situation on what I consider. To answer to your question, yeah, I was actually 16 when I first worked at 3AK.
Right.
And the reason why I got the gig in the first place was because a guy who you'll be talking to, I believe, later, a guy called Nigel Dick.
Oh, yes.
Taking a monumental thrashing in the ratings. They virtually had a 0 beside their name.
An asterisk, they call that now.
That's the one.
Yeah.
And he said, we're going to put you on for a month on the trial basis, purely and simply because, and of course, it just went on from there.
Mind you, there's been a lot of blind disc jockeys. I was one for a couple of years.
You were?
Yes.
Too many glasses of red, huh?
That's what it was. Yeah, we all enjoyed ourselves back then. But you at 16, the youngest on...
Yeah, and at that stage, not even with a drink either.
No, that came later.
It did.
Now, Grantley, how did you always want to be in radio, or from an early age, or was it just luck? How did it happen?
When I was 3 years old...
Oh, that far back.
When I try and find the little guy inside the wireless.
Oh, fantastic.
And when I couldn't find him, and I absolutely horrified my mum, and I said from there on in, I said, I am going to be a man on the wireless.
Yeah.
And so I worked my bottom off with a lot of encouragement and help from my mum and my dad, and I eventually got there.
Well, you certainly made an impact. Let's have a listen to Grantley D on the air on 3AK.
3AK, that does, folks.
1500, wonderful 3AK.
54 degrees in our town. Just a bit of top temp for today. Should be around about 7 this morning. Love to hear from you. Love to play a record and say hi and make your morning a little bit brighter. 420-209 is the friendly 9 minutes away from 2 o'clock radio. On Mary Hopkins, one of our high-flying happy hits.
Once upon a time, there was a
Oh, I haven't heard High Flying Happy Hits for years.
No, it's a little while, isn't it? Another radio station, a community radio station.
Okay.
88.3 Southern FM.
Yeah.
And we were virtually doing the same thing. It was as if I'd never walked away from it.
Yeah, you still got it. Yeah. That's excellent, Gradley. Great to hear that. Some great memories there. What are some great memories that you have of the time that you were the youngest good guy in Australia?
Mate, I couldn't even begin to sort of tell you, because we'd be here forever. I had a lot of fun times. In fact, I got to tell you, in all honesty, you hear a lot of people these days who are sort of talking about, geez, I don't feel like going to work. Are not true at all in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
You know, in all honesty, I never, ever, ever wanted to take one day off.
Yeah.
And all the time I was working on radio, I just loved it.
Yeah.
It wasn't a job for me. It was an absolute joy.
Yeah. Now, apparently you were sacked for playing games.
No, I did a commercial for the Age newspaper, actually.
Yeah.
In which I impersonated, I think it might have been Billy Snedden or one of the, and I actually did the ad, and it said, and the then station manager, Gary Day, sent for me because Colin Betnell, and who was the manager of TTV Channel 9, and Sir Frank Packer, they heard it, and Sir Frank Packer was deeply offended because he was a very big Liberal.
Oh, well, that's even better.
Certainly.
Now, what was the other one about turning off the transmitter and getting sprung doing that?
No, that isn't true at all. The truth.
Malcolm Searle, is it?
No, the truth of the matter is that I was doing a program, which all of us need to do from time to time.
Exactly.
And so I put the perennial favourite of all radio presenters,
MacArthur Park.
You got it.
7 minutes, 13 seconds.
That's the one. And I thought the loo, but the bloody door wouldn't open when I tried to get out.
Oh no!
And there was no one else in the building other than an ethnic cleaner, and I couldn't make the guy understand. I'm screaming and yelling and trying to do everything, and eventually I got over. Didn't deliberately turn it off at all.
Great story. Gradley D, of course, you went on to become a recording artist. Let the Little Girl Dance, great song, and you were performing out in shows all around the time. So you've had a great time, haven't you?
I'm still doing it now, and
that's good.
I might add, Let the Little Girl Dance was not a choice of mine. Through the studio door one day, he was more or less a mentor of mine for many, many years.
Yeah.
And he just said, put your panel on cue, and I want you to listen to a song. You're going to be recording this tomorrow. And he made me listen to this song, and it was by a guy called Billy Bland, and it was Let the Little Girl Dance, and I screamed and yelled and kicked and squawked, and of course I did it, and the rest is history.
Yeah. Well, Gradley, when you think about 3AK and you think about the personality era and also the good guy era, you always think of Gradley D, and it's just been a pleasure to have you on. And I'd love to have you on the couch in one of my nights in the next couple of weeks, and we can talk further about it and play the songs and spend a bit more.
The use of your radio.
Gradley D.
When you want gelato, it's Taranto's. Casata or tattoo for say Taranto's. Fiesta, slice or muffin, you love Taranto's. Continental ice cream, Taranto's.
Treat yourself to the luxury of delicious continental ice cream. You'll agree with world travelers that Taranto's genuine continental. Contact this station for the address of your nearest Taranto's shop.
That was Gavin Wood there speaking to Grantley. By the way, Gavin Wood is currently in America working on radio. Anyway, we have one more little feature to finish off our program this time round. We're going to play a little excerpt from a magazine, an audio magazine I received. It was recorded by Keith Glenn. He reads an article about Grantley.
In this particular program or magazine, we do share very often some special, as a headline, a blind disc jockey who talked and sang his way to the top. And of course, that blind disc jockey was well known to many of us. We knew him personally. His name was Grantley Dee. He was a disc jockey and a singer in his own right. He lived from the second live. Grantley Dee was the youngest blind disc jockey in the world when he began his career in Melbourne in the 1960s when he was age 16. He became an inspiration to other young people with impaired vision. He died in Mount Eliza after a long series of illnesses. But Grantley, who was born to Mary and John Deserter in Windsor, Institute for the Blind, and St Paul's School at Kew, and St Edmunds in Sydney. And his interest in radio and career was intertwined as a radio announcer and a popular vocalist. He had his first hit record, Let the Little Girl Dance, at the age of 20. The RVIB recognised Dee's vocal ability in its choir, and with tuition from Brother Connell of St Paul's, he won many Eisteddfods, and he also won Australia's Phantom Race Call. Well, they've got to have a good imagination for that, haven't they? A Phantom Race Call. And he became a regular guest tipster on Bert Bryant's Turf Talk. For a young fellow, that was amazing. And his mother had Institute's view that he should make baskets and persisted in helping to identify radio opportunities. Now, John McMahon of 3KZ, I'm sure many of you remember John, he contacted Les Murray to tutor Grantley Dee for radio. And he also began studying Braille and took lessons after a performance by Grantley Dee at the Southern Cross Hotel, caught the attention of 3AK manager David Joseph. And with help from leading DJ Stan Rofe, Grantley prepared an audition tape in 1963. He won 16 consecutive weeks of Beat the Champ at Z, retired undefeated to become a featured vocalist. Performances at Mentone Town Hall followed, where the compere, Brian de Courcy, suggested that he shorten his name to D, D-double-E. And when Joseph hired D, 3AK's ratings were rock bottom. D was a bit of a novelty. The audience, and soon he had more on-air shifts, and eventually he was competing with his radio idol Stan Rofe in the drive time slot, and he had his own program called The Grantley Dee Show. Now, the king of television, Graham Kennedy, was taken by Dee and made a point of introducing himself to the young DJ and offered to be his mentor. Regular casting 7 days a week. These pre-recorded shows were aired by a panel operator. Ratings were very close between the stations as they presented top 40 flashbacks, predictions and interviews. And with the potential of a format change to beautiful music, Dee left 3AK for 70X in Launceston, where he stayed for about 9 months. 1965 and 1967, a similar poll conducted by Listener in TV. So Grantley and his seeing eye dog Penny were a tight duo. Often the Labrador was with him at performances and was unperturbed by the volume of the music and the crowds. Some nights they would be at 4 different venues, and together they attended radio, shorthand and typing lessons to maintain their independence. Grantley toured with Mark Winter, Jerry and the Pacemakers, Dusty Springfield, Brian Poole and Gene Pitney. He also shared the stage with Johnny O'Keefe and the Bee Gees, Oliver and Johnny Chester, just to mention a few of them. And in 1966, O'Keefe arrived at 3AK and informed Grantley Dee that he'd arranged a recording session for him the next day. It was to be his biggest hit, Let the Little Girl Dance. And the song entered charts short of a gold record. And this success led to a big increase in on-stage performances. He appeared in Commotion, Bandstand, In Melbourne Tonight, 6 O'Clock Rock, and The Graham Kennedy Show. And many other records followed. Some years later, he didn't particularly like the solo records that he had made, preferred tracks that he recorded with the All-Stars many years later, particularly Karina Karina and An American Trilogy. And in the cover notes of Dee's 1967 self-titled album, Wildest Dreams, his achievements are not just great but spectacular. As an accomplished young teenage vocalist, he was causing a stampede on every occasion that he sang. Well, Dee continued to perform every night of the week into the mid-1970s, when the introduction of discos and an economic downturn began in the 80s, and they released 4 albums. In 1991, Dee featured in Rocking Back the Clock at the Melbourne Concert Hall, and that was the first show involving performers who began their careers on the rock and roll scene as he presented at the prestigious venue. And during this period, he shared the stage with the Platters, Chubby Checker, and Buddy Holly's Crickets as his health deteriorated. Now, that tribute to him was presented for the age by Ian Allen OAM, musician and producer of nostalgic rock and roll shows, and I think gives a very good comprehensive rundown on an amazing career of that blind disc jockey, our old friend Grantley Dee.
And that article was read by Keith Glover, former announcer on the ABC and Radio Australia. Keith was reading that in a magazine which is produced by the Royal Victorian Institute for the Blind in Melbourne. We took the liberty of copying that from one of the 2005 editions. Well, that's about all the time. We had another very good tribute program, which was presented by Arthur Stevens. That plays for about 25 minutes or so. So maybe we can pop that into the next edition of our program. Well, must sign off now. Time is up. So until then, we'll say cheerio from Australian Radio.
At home, the beach, wherever you are, radio entertains you near and far. Wherever you go, there is radio.
To serve you for 6 years, but in the 7th year, he shall go free without paying anything. If he comes alone, he is to go free alone. But if he has a wife when he comes, she is to go with him. If his master gives him a wife, and she bears him sons or daughters, the woman and her children shall belong to her master, and only the man, my wife and children, and do not want to go free. Then his master must take him before the judges. He shall take him to the door or the doorpost and pierce his ear with an awl. Then he will be his servant for life. If a man sells his daughter as a servant who has selected her for himself, he must let her be redeemed. He has no right to sell her to foreigners, because he has broken faith with her. If he selects her for his son, he must grant her the rights of a daughter. If he marries another woman, he must not deprive the first one of her food, clothing. She is to go free without any payment of money. Anyone who strikes someone a fatal blow is to be put to death. However, if it is not done intentionally, but God lets it happen, they kill someone deliberately, that person is to be taken from my altar and put to death. Anyone who attacks their father or mother is to be put to death. Anyone who kidnaps someone is to be put to death. Whether the victim has been sold, is to be put to death. If two people quarrel and one hits the other with a stone or with a fist, and the victim does not die, but is confined to bed, the one who struck the blow will not be held liable if the other can get up and walk around outside with a staff. However, the guilty party will be healed. Anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result. But they are not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or two, since the slave is their property. If people are fighting and are pregnant prematurely, but there is no serious injury, the offender must be fined whatever the woman's husband demands and the court allows. But if there is serious injury, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn. Who hits a male or female slave in the eye and destroys it must let the slave go free to compensate for the eye. And an owner who knocks out the tooth of a male or female slave must let the slave go free to compensate for the tooth. If a bull gores a man or a woman to death, the bull is to be stoned to death. But the owner of the bull will not be held responsible. If, however, the bull has had the habit of goring, and the owner has been warned but has not kept it penned up, and it kills a man or woman, the bull is to be stoned and its owner also. The owner's life may be redeemed by the payment of whatever is demanded. This law also applies if the bull gores a son or daughter. If the bull gores a male or female slave, the owner must pay 30 shekels of silver to the master of the slave, and the bull is to be stoned to death. If anyone uncovers a pit or digs one and fails to cover it, and an ox or a donkey falls into it, the one who opened the pit must pay the owner for the loss and take the dead animal in exchange. If anyone's bull injures the bull of another and it dies, the two parties are to sell the live one and divide both the money and the dead animal equally. However, if it was known that the bull had the habit of goring, yet the owner did not keep it penned up, the owner must pay in exchange.
Chapter 32. Give ear, O ye heavens, and I will speak, and hear, O earth, the words of my mouth. My doctrine shall drop as the rain, my speech shall distill as the dew, as the small rain upon the tender herb, and as the showers upon the grass. Because I will publish the name of the Lord. Ascribe ye greatness unto our God. It is he. They have corrupted themselves. Their spot is not the spot of his children. They are a perverse and crooked generation. Do ye thus requite the Lord, O foolish people and unwise? Is not he thy father that hath bought thee? Hath he not made thee and established thee? Remember the days of old. Consider the years of many generations. Ask thy father, and he will show thee, thy elders, and they will tell thee. When the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. For the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is the lot of him. He led him about. He instructed him. He kept him as the apple of his eye. As an eagle stirreth up her nest, fluttereth over her young, spreadeth abroad her wings, taketh them, beareth them on her wings, so the Lord alone did lead him, and there was no strange God with him. He made him ride on the high places of the earth, that he might eat the increase of the and milk of sheep, with fat of lambs, and rams of the breed of Bashan, and goats with the fat of kidneys of wheat. And thou didst drink the pure blood of the grape. But Jeshurun waxed fat and kicked. Thou art waxen fat, thou art grown thick, thou art covered with fatness. Then he forsook God, which made him, and likely abominations provoked they him to anger. They sacrificed unto devils, not to God, to gods whom they knew not, to new gods that came newly up, whom your fathers feared not. Of the rock that begat thee, thou art unmindful, and hast forgotten God that formed thee. And when the Lord saw it, he abhorred them, to see what their end shall be. For they are a very froward generation, children in whom is no faith. They have moved me to jealousy with that which is not God. They have provoked me to anger with their vanities, and I will move them to jealousy with those which are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. For a fire is kindled in mine anger, and shall burn unto the lowest hell, and shall consume the earth with her increase, and set on fire the foundations of the mountains. I will heap mischiefs upon them. I will spend mine arrows upon them. They shall be burnt with hunger, and devoured with burning heat, and with bitter destruction. I will also send the teeth of beasts upon them, with the poison of serpents of the dust. The sword without, and terror within, shall destroy both the young man and the virgin. The suckling also, with the remembrance of them to cease from among men. were it not that I feared the wrath of the enemy, lest their adversaries should behave themselves strangely, and lest they should say, Our hand is high, and the Lord hath not done all this. For they are a nation void of counsel, neither is there any understanding in them. To their latter end, how should one chase 1,000, and two put 10,000 to flight, except their rock had sold them, and the Lord had shut them up? For their rock is not as our rock, even our enemies themselves being judges. For their vine is of the vine of Sodom, and of the... Is not this laid up in store with me, and sealed up among my treasures? To me belongeth vengeance and recompense. Their foot shall slide in due time, for the day of their calamity is at hand, and the things that shall come upon them make haste. For the Lord shall judge his up or left, and he shall say, Where are their gods, their rock in whom they trusted, which did eat the fat of their sacrifices, and drank the wine of their drink offerings? Let them rise up and help you, and be your protection. See now that I, even I, am he, and there is no God with me. Into heaven and say, I live forever. If I whet my glittering sword, and mine hand take hold on judgment, I will render vengeance to mine enemies, and will reward them that hate me. I will make mine arrows drunk with blood, and my sword shall devour flesh. And that with the blood of the slain and of the captive. For he will avenge the blood of his servants, and will render vengeance to his adversaries, and will be merciful unto his land and to his people. Moses came and spake all the words of this song in the ears of the people, he and Hoshea the son of Nun. And Moses made an end of speaking all these words to all Israel, and he said unto them, Set your hearts unto all the words of this law, for it is not a vain thing for you, because it is your life. And through this thing ye shall prolong your days in the land, whither ye go over Jordan to possess it. And the Lord spake unto Moses that selfsame day, saying, Get thee up into this mountain Abarim, unto Mount Nebo for a possession, and die in the mount whither thou goest up, and be gathered unto thy people, as Aaron thy brother died in Mount Hor, and was gathered unto his people. Because ye trespassed against me among the children of Israel at the waters of Meribah Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin, because ye sanctified me not in the midst of the children of Israel. Yet thou shalt see the land.
And along the entire coast of the Mediterranean Sea, as far as Lebanon, the kings of the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, they came together to make war against Joshua and Israel. However, when the people of Nation, whose donkeys were loaded with worn-out sacks and old wineskins, cracked and mended, they put worn and patched sandals on their feet and wore old clothes. All the bread of their food supply was dry and moldy. Then they went to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal and said to him and the Israelites,
But perhaps you live near us, so how can we make a treaty with you?
We are your servants,
they said to Joshua. But Joshua asked,
Who are you, and where do you come from?
They answered,
For we have heard reports of him, all that he did in me. Go and meet them and say to them, We are your servants, make a treaty with us. This bread of ours was warm when we packed it at home on the day we left to come to you, but now see how dry and moldy it is, and these wines long journey.
The Israelites sampled their provisions, but did not inquire of the Lord. Then Joshua made a treaty of peace with them to let them live, and the leaders of the assembly ratified it by oath. 3 days after they made the treaty with the Gibeonites. So the Israelites set out, and on the 3rd day came to their cities, Gibeon, Kephirah, Beeroth, and Kiriath Jearim. But the Israelites did not attack them, because the leaders of the assembly had sworn an oath to them by the Lord, the God of Israel. The whole assembly grumbled against the leaders, but all the leaders answered,
We have given them our oath by... We will let them live, so that God's wrath will not fall on us for breaking the oath we swore to them.
They continued,
Let them live, but let them be woodcutters and water carriers for the entire community.
So the leader's promise to them was kept. Then Joshua summoned the Gibeonites and said,
Why did you deceive us by saying we live a long way from you? You will never cease to serve as woodcutters and water carriers for the house of my God.
They answered Joshua,
Your servants were clearly told how the Lord your God had commanded his servant Moses to give you the whole land and to wipe out all its inhabitants. Why we did this? We are now in your hands. Do to us whatever seems good and right to you.
So Joshua saved them from the Israelites, and they did not kill them. That day he made the Gibeonites woodcutters and water carriers for the community and for the altar of the Lord at the place the Lord would choose. And that is what they are to this day.
Chapter 2. And Joshua the son of Nun sent out of Shittim 2 men to God's house named Rahab, and lodged there. And it was told the king of Jericho, saying, Behold, there came men in hither tonight of the children of Israel to search out the country. And the king of Jericho sent unto Rahab, saying, Bring forth the men that are come to thee, which are entered into thine house, for they be come to search out all the country. And the woman took the 2 men, and hid them, and said thus, There came men on this dark that the men went out. Whither the men went, I wot not. Pursue after them quickly, for ye shall overtake them. But she had brought them up to the roof of the house, and hid them with the stalks of flax, which she had laid in order upon the roof. And the men pursued after them the way to Jordan unto the fords. And as soon as they which pursued, she said unto the men, I know that the Lord hath given you the land, and that your terror is fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land faint because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you, when ye came out of Egypt, and what ye did unto the 2 kings of the Amorites that were on the other side Jordan, Sihon. Neither did there remain any more courage in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above, and in earth beneath. Now therefore I pray you, swear unto me by the Lord, since I have showed you kindness, that ye will also show kindness unto my father's house, and give me a true token, and that ye will save alive my father and my mother and my brethren, and our life for yours, if ye utter not this our business. And it shall be when the Lord hath given us the land, that we will deal kindly and truly with thee. Then she let them down by a cord through the window, for her house was upon the town wall, and she dwelt upon the wall. And she said unto them, Get you to the mountain, lest the pursuers meet you, and hide yourselves there 3 days, until the pursuers be returned. And afterward may ye go your way. Thou shalt bind this line thread in the window which thou didst let us down by. And thou shalt bring thy father, and thy mother, and thy brethren, and all thy father's household home unto thee. And it shall be that whosoever shall go out of the doors of thy house into the street, his blood shall be upon his head, and we will be guiltless. And whosoever shall be with thee in the house, his blood shall be on our head, if any hand be upon him. And if thou utter this our business, then we will be quit of thine oath which thou hast made. Them away, and they departed, and she bound the scarlet line in the window. And they went and came unto the mountain, and abode there 3 days, until the pursuers were returned. And the pursuers sought them throughout all the way, but found them not. So the 2 men returned, and descended from the mountain, and passed over, and came to Joshua the son of Nun, and told him all the things, for even all the inhabitants of the country do faint because of us.
Therefore, there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, because through Christ Jesus, the law of the Spirit, who gives life, has set you free from the law of sin and death, by sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful humanity to be a sin offering. And so he condemns sin in human flesh, in order that the righteous requirement of the law might be fully met in us. The sinful nature have their minds set on what that nature desires. But those who live in accordance with the Spirit, sinful nature is death, but the mind controlled by the Spirit is life and peace. The sinful mind is hostile to God. It does not submit to God's law, nor can it do so. Those controlled by the sinful nature cannot be in the Spirit, if indeed the Spirit of God lives in you. And if anyone does not have the Spirit of Christ, they do not belong to Christ. But if Christ is in you, then even though your body is subject to death because of sin, the Spirit gives life, because he who raised Christ from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies because of his Spirit who lives in you. Therefore, brothers and sisters, we have an obligation. But it is not to the sinful nature to live according to it. For if you live according to the sinful nature, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the misdeeds of the body, you will live. For those who are led by the Spirit of God are the children of God. Rather, the Spirit you received brought about your adoption to sonship. And by him we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's co-heirs with Christ, if indeed we share in his sufferings, in order that we may also share in his glory. I know that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. The creation waits, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to the present time, not only eagerly for our adoption, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we were saved. But hope that is seen is no hope at all. Who hopes for what they already have? But if we hope in the same way, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. We do not know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us through wordless groans. And he who searches our hearts knows the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for God's people in accordance with the will of God. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been